Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen, and thank you for joining me for another journey into the world of shinobi. Before we begin, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who listens, supports the channel, and enjoys these stories. Today's story is part 3 of Konoha's Dream Team. In this story, Naruto awakens the legendary wood style and befriends Sasuke shortly after the Uchiha massacre. With Hinata Hyuga by their side, the three form a team unlike any other, a perfect balance of power, loyalty, and heart. This is the story of what happens when Naruto is not alone, when Sasuke is not consumed by hate, and when two legends rise together. This is a fan-made story inspired by the world of Naruto. All characters in the original universe belong to their respective creators. This narration is created for entertainment purposes as part of a transformative storytelling experience. The story itself was written by ZenoNoKyuubi, and full credit goes to the original author. If you would like to read the original version, the link to the story is included in the video description below. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Chapter 11, Sasuke ni Chan. Uchiha Sasuke, 16-year-old Konohagakure Chunin, sighed as he rubbed his forehead. In the 3 years since Naruto went off with Jiraiya on his training trip, Sasuke had made a drastic change to his wardrobe. He no longer wore any real Uchiha style of clothing. Instead, he wore traditional, black Chunin clothes. The only thing that wasn't standard was the arm guards he wore, which stretched down to segment into a handguard, which was held to his hands by straps. He still had a kunai pouch on the left side of his back waist, and his chikudo on his right. The only thing different about the shirt he wore was that while he had the standard Uzumaki swirl on his right shoulder, symbolizing Konoha's strong ties with the Uzumaki clan, he had the Uchiha symbol on his left. Sasuke's head turned toward the source of the voice, now 12-year-old Sarutobi Konohamaru, who approached him with his two friends, Moegi and Udon, as he sat on one of the 3 poles at Team 7's old training ground. "What's wrong, Konohamaru?" Sasuke asked. "We're graduating in a couple of days," Konohamaru said with a massive grin. "So, teach us something cool to show off with at graduation." "Ninja aren't supposed to show off their moves, you know," Sasuke muttered. "Besides, I may have taught you a few taijutsu moves, but teaching you guys is really Naruto's job." "But he's not here right now," Moegi muttered, doing her very best to give him a set of heart-wrenching puppy dog eyes. Unfortunately for her, Sasuke had repeatedly demonstrated that Uchiha were immune to that technique. "It doesn't matter if you learn it now, a week from now, or a month from now, I guarantee that Naruto will be back long before you go out on C-rank missions," Sasuke said, hopping off the pole and walking off. "Later, guys," Sasuke sighed as he walked. He liked the Konohamaru Corps, that was for damn sure. They were adorable most of the time, but they tended to annoy him now and then. It was a real bother that only Naruto seemed to be patient enough with. Sasuke supposed it was because annoying idiots had no problem hanging out with other annoying idiots. Aakho. A certain blonde-haired 16-year-old sneezed loudly as he walked along the path leading toward Konoha. He had changed his outfit since he left, now wearing standard shinobi clothes. The only thing that really set him apart from most other ninja was the 2 kunai pouches he had strapped to his back waist, along with the large fur collar that was attached to his shirt. His Chunin vest didn't have a collar, as it would have gotten in the way of his fur. "Oh ho, sounds like some young beauty is talking about you, eh?" the old man walking next to him said, a great lecherous grin on his face. "Maybe it's that sake girl in Digarashi, eh? Poke a hole in that stiffy of yours, pervert," Senju Naruto muttered, glaring at the old man. "It was just a sneeze. Although I do have this sudden urge to break Sasuke's nose. You've said that thousands of times now all throughout our trip," Jiraiya said. "Are you sure you guys are friends?" "Oh yeah, best of friends," Naruto said with a nod. "But, you know, that doesn't mean I don't get the urge to break his face if he insults me." The duo saw the gates in the distance, open as usual. Without a doubt, Kotetsu and Izumo were once more guarding it. It seemed like they had the habit of drawing the short straw again and again. It's been a while, but..." Naruto grinned at Jiraiya. "I think I can beat you. You brat, you're 100 years too early to challenge me." Jiraiya barked. He looked indignant for only a moment, however, before he grinned as well. "But since you're insistent, I suppose I can show you how inferior you are." "Alright, Then, Naruto said as he knelt and picked up a rock. Hokage Tower? Tsunade's office. Okay, ready, and Naruto tossed the rock into the air, and the two watched as it descended. The second it hit the ground, the two ninja disappeared in a blur. Meanwhile, in Tsunade's office, the blonde Hokage was staring at Uchiha Sasuke with disapproval. When a mission is completed, isn't a shinobi's first duty to report to the Hokage? She muttered. Why was I informed that you went to the training ground first? I needed a rest, and I can write better reports with a clear mind, Sasuke said as he handed over his report, which Tsunade took with a grumble. It seems you've got an answer for everything, doesn't it? Tsunade said, chuckling softly. It seems Naruto rubbed off on you more than you care to admit. It seems I did catch a bit of laziness from him, Sasuke said with a nod. It's just too bad he's not around. Watching the clouds is no fun when you're alone. By the way, have you heard? Tsunade was interrupted when her window was suddenly smashed, a black, white, and yellow blur flipping into the office. The blur landed on its feet, followed quickly by a red, green, and white blur. First, Senju Naruto exclaimed, raising his hands triumphantly into the air. Damn it, Jiraiya muttered, panting slightly. Were I 10 years younger, I would have won that, and you know it. Naruto? Jiraiya? Tsunade asked, her eyes wide as she stared at the two ninja. Why the hell did you smash my window? Well, if I'd taken the time to open it, he would have caught up, Naruto said, jutting his thumb over his shoulder to point at Jiraiya. Yo, it's been a while, Sasuke said, which made Naruto's head snap toward him. Sasuke, Naruto exclaimed, a bright smile appearing on his face as he rushed up to his brother and gave him a bone-crushing hug. To a bystander, such as Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Shizune, it looked hilarious as Naruto's monster strength made Sasuke's body go slack. And Naruto was swinging him around as though he was hugging a ragdoll. Naruto. Sasuke wheezed, tapping Naruto's arm. It's been so long, Naruto sang, completely ignoring his friend, as was customary for him. When he finally let Sasuke go, the Uchiha had to lean on him for a moment to catch his breath. Then, he straightened up, and immediately noticed something. The hell? Sasuke muttered, putting a hand on Naruto's head to push down his hair. You've gotten as tall as me. What are you on about? I've always been as tall as you. No, you've always been an inch shorter than me, Sasuke said, glaring at Naruto. Why are you suddenly just as tall? Because I'm awesome, that's why. As heartwarming as this reunion is, I expect a report on your training. Tsunade spoke up, making both ninja look at her. And I want it today. Alright, pervert, I'll leave it to you, Naruto said, nodding to Jiraiya, whose head snapped in his direction. Before he could say anything, however, Naruto blurted away. I better go too and make sure the idiot doesn't hurt himself, Sasuke said. Knowing him, he's probably forgotten where to go. With that, he blurted away as well. If he wanted to leave, he didn't have to make up such a lame excuse. Tsunade muttered, frowning. Then, she glanced at Jiraiya. So, what did you do? There wasn't really much I could teach him, Jiraiya said happily. That kid is a genius. Well, at least when it comes to jutsu. The only thing I could teach him was fuinjutsu. And even there, he was already knowledgeable. I was also amazed when he showed a strong affinity for a third element. A third? During the last 3 years, Hinata had found friends in Ino and Sakura. While Sakura had once been the type to not really make friends with her, she had changed after Ino had brought her along to meet with Hinata a couple of times. So now, the three of them were friends, and they always took the time to meet and catch up between missions. It was happening less often now, though, when all three of them were chunin, but that just meant that they had more to talk about when they met up for dinner. This is horrible, though. Sakura muttered as they sat in Toyama Dango, her head dropping to press her forehead against the table they sat at. I'm almost 17 years old. I was hoping to at least have a boyfriend by now. But then I find out Sasuke-kun is. It seemed like Sakura still couldn't say the word. There's more than one boy in Konoha, though, Hinata said softly, smiling at Sakura. Over the last 3 years, she had really started gaining confidence. She was still as soft-spoken as ever, but now she hardly ever stuttered, and often managed to refrain from mumbling. You even have 2 on your team. Don't even mention them. Sakura whined, straightening up again. Shino is weird and has all these bugs crawling around inside him, And even if I do think that Kiba is kinda attractive with his wild attitude, he's way too dog-like for me. I think you might be a bit too picky, Ino commented, which got her a glare from Sakura. Don't be a pot calling a kettle black. I don't see you hooking up with Shikamaru or Choji. Well, I don't have to. I've already set my sights on someone else, Ino said with a pleased smirk. Eh? Who? Sakura asked, her eyes widening. Hinata was also looking at Ino curiously. Well, considering Sasuke-kun is now off limits, I'm going to go for the second best, Ino said, then added thoughtfully, though to be honest, being best and second best kinda varies between talents with those two. You don't mean Naruto? Sakura asked in surprise. Why not? He sure is cute enough, Ino said, a blush springing up on her face. Probably the only reason why I didn't go for him back at the academy was because he was always so loud, but I bet he's mellowed out now, traveling with Jiraiya-sama. And besides, Ino looked like she was on the verge of drooling now. Given how Sasuke has grown more handsome, imagine how much dishier Naruto must be now. The three girls took a moment to imagine just how Naruto might have aged in the last 3 years, before Sakura started rubbing her chin thoughtfully. You know, now that I think about it, he was kinda cute, wasn't he? And he was easier to talk to than Sasuke-kun, that's for sure. Hinata, you sure are lucky, having those two and Kakashi-sensei on your team. Ino muttered. Shikamaru and Choji are great friends and teammates, and Asuma-sensei is a great teacher, but what I wouldn't give for a little eye candy once in a while. She looked ready to cry. What kind of woman would enjoy being around a slacker, a fatty, and a bearded chain smoker all day? I take it something happened in your last mission? Hinata asked, smiling. We were supposed to guard this box with some kind of treasure in it as it was transported from tea country to water country. Then the boat was hit by a rough wave, and the box was knocked into the water. Ino told them, frowning. Shikamaru said it would be troublesome to hop in after it. Choji claimed you shouldn't swim right after eating, and Asuma-sensei didn't want to get his cigarette wet, so they picked me up and threw me in. Hinata and Sakura started laughing softly at the indignant and huffing Ino. What kind of gentlemen are they, huh? Well, Naruto hasn't really showed any gentlemanly sides, has he? Sakura asked with a smirk. Oh, that's right, he hasn't. Actually, Hinata spoke up, catching their attention. While Naruto-kun isn't the traditional type of gentleman, he's always very kind and helpful. Ooh, I did not expect that about him. Sakura muttered. Then again, it's stupid to judge someone based on appearances and such. I mean, at first I thought Kiba was just this loud, dead last show-off, but you know, he's actually really strong and dangerously loyal to the team. The three girls leaned back in their seats, thinking about just what kind of hidden sides about their male teammates they might have missed. Then, Sakura leaned forward and looked at Ino again. By the way, you may have some competition for Naruto's affection now, even if Hinata's given up on her crush. Huh? Ino blinked. What do you mean? Well, on top of training with her, I often help Tsunade-sama with her paperwork, and the other day, I had to update the ninja registry. When I did so, I got a good look at Naruto's file. Most of the information regarding his birth and such was blacked out, but what interested me was the last 3 years. He's completed 24 C-rank missions, 16 B-rank, 17 A-rank, and 1 S-rank since he left. That's more than Sasuke-kun. No way, Ino exclaimed. And there's more, Sakura continued, leaning closer. Tsunade-sama, on top of payment for the missions, has received 3 requests for arranged marriages for Naruto, from no less than 3 daimyo. Haruna from Vegetable Country, Toki from Bird Country, and that actress and daimyo Kazuhana Koyuki. A daimyo can have anyone. Why pick Naruto? Ino muttered, furrowing her brow. Shouldn't they stick to guys from their own countries? No need to snag our hotties. I think you just answered your own question as to why they'd pick Naruto, Sakura commented, which made all 3 of them laugh quietly to themselves. 2 pairs of sandaled feet were heard landing outside the shop. Then the sandals met the wooden floor inside, and a very familiar voice was heard shouting, Toyama-san. Dango, Dango. 3 heads snapped toward the entrance, to see that Senju Naruto had entered, a huge grin on his face, with Sasuke in tow, smirking. Oh ho, Naruto-kun, Sasuke-kun. Toyama, the elderly owner, said with a bright smile upon seeing the 2 ninja. It's been a while since the both of you came here together. The usual? You know it. Coming right up. Naruto-kun, Hinata exclaimed, shooting to her feet. Naruto looked at her, his grin widening. Hinata. Hinata suddenly went completely red-faced, as she, like Sasuke, suddenly became the victim of Naruto's bear hug, and was swung around like a rag doll. It's been so damn long. Naruto sang happily. It's great to see the old faces again. Yo, Ino, Sakura. You alright? Why you shouldn't ask us that, Naruto. Sakura said urgently. You should ask Hinata, eh? Naruto looked down at the girl in his arms, to see that she was frantically tapping out, her face steadily getting redder. Oh, sorry, Naruto said, letting her go. I was just so damn happy to see you again. It's not been the same, going on missions without the team. It's okay, Naruto-kun. Hinata wheezed, massaging her sore neck. Okay, dango for the boys. Toyama announced as he approached them, a tray in his hands. On the tray were 2 clay plates, each with 3 dango stick on them. Thanks, Toyama-san, Naruto said happily, taking both plates and moving over to the girls' table, setting them down as Sasuke grabbed 2 nearby chairs and brought them over. Is it alright if we sit here? Of course, Ino said, blushing slightly as she and Sakura looked the blonde over, taking notice of how he had lost pretty much all of his baby fat now. His face no longer cute, but handsome instead, with a nice tan which looked amazing together with his hair and eye colors. Thanks, Naruto said with a grin as he and Sasuke sat down. By the way, Hinata, Sasuke muttered, glancing at their teammate. Have you noticed? Hinata had become very good at reading people, especially Sasuke, so she knew exactly what he was grumpy about now. Yes, he gained the inch, she said with a pleasant smile. Inch? Ino and Sakura repeated in confusion. Sasuke-kun has always been 1 inch taller than Naruto-kun, Hinata explained. But it seems they're both the same height now. But man, I've missed this place, Naruto said happily as he looked outside. The Toyama Dango shop was located very close to the east wall, also within walking distance of the hot springs, so there was a very pleasant scent in the air, and it wasn't surrounded by a bunch of buildings, giving it a very serene atmosphere. Hey, Naruto, Sasuke said, having already stripped 1 stick of its dumplings. He held it up with a smirk. It's been a while. Hey, Naruto grinned as he stripped his stick of its last dumpling and held it up as he swallowed. You should be careful, though. My power has only grown during my trip. What are they doing? Ino whispered to Hinata. Naruto-kun and Sasuke-kun like to compete, Hinata explained, pointing to a tree outside the shop. They tend to compete about who can throw the sticks the best, often either just throwing one as a test of accuracy, or trying to make shapes with several. Who wins? Sakura wanted to know. It depends. We're tied now, Naruto said, letting them know that he had heard their whispered conversation. 40 wins, 40 losses. Both friends got up and stood next to each other, looking at the tree. Then, they turned around to face the other way. Sasuke closed his eyes and thought for a while, then opened his eyes and raised the stick in his hand to look at it. You saw that bulge in the bark, with the swirl? A meter from the ground, right in the middle? Naruto asked with a smirk, which was mimicked by Sasuke. Center of the swirl. Naruto nodded. Then the two spun around and flung their needles with impossible speeds. Sasuke had thrown his first, which impacted with their target with dangerous accuracy, hitting the swirl dead center and burying itself about 2 inches into the bark. Then came Naruto's stick, hitting Sasuke's and piercing straight through it into the tree, and through it, to embed itself in the wooden fence behind it. Naruto grinned as he was met with 4 slack jaws. Even Sasuke was staring with his mouth open as Naruto dusted off his hands and sat down. Another draw, I guess. And just as he finishes bragging, boom, the whole damn castle goes up in one big, beautiful ball of flame. Naruto told the people around the table, giving a bark of laughter. Sasuke was smirking, and the 3 girls were listening intently, their mouths slightly agape. It was one thing to read about the missions he'd completed, it was another thing to hear about it, after all. I imagine that pissed him off, Sasuke said, which made Naruto snort. Unfortunately, no. It depressed him. When he realized that the pervert and I had already figured him out and planned around his own plans, he just broke down. Broke down? Hinata repeated. What do you mean? I mean, he realized just how screwed he was and, instead of fighting to his last breath, just dropped into a fetal position and started mumbling to himself, Naruto said, scoffing as he attempted to pick his teeth with a dango stick. It was kinda sad, really, so he knocked him out and brought him to the authorities. Kinda anticlimactic, especially considering how much he was bragging, Sasuke commented. By the way, Naruto, Konohamaru and his friends are graduating in a couple of days. You should go see them. Oh, it's been a while since I saw Saru. Naruto said, grinning. I bet he's grown a lot. Then, Naruto blinked in realization, and he looked to Sasuke. By the way, come with me for a moment. Without another word, and without waiting for a response, Naruto rose from his chair and grabbed Sasuke's vest, before pulling the Uchiha with him out of the shop, leaving 3 confused kunoichi behind. What the hell? Sasuke uttered once they were outside, wrenching himself out of Naruto's grip. What's the matter? How is it? Naruto asked, knowing Sasuke would understand what he meant right away. Throbbing with pain occasionally, Sasuke said, crossing his arms. I don't know why, and neither does Kakashi. We tried to figure it out, but it's not like we're great at fuinjutsu. But I am, Naruto said, sounding very pleased with himself. I've been studying the pervert's notes on the curse seal, what he's learned from his informants, and what he's learned from studying Anko-san and those 4 who put up the barrier during the invasion. I think I've managed to create an even better suppressing seal than the one you already have. And, naturally, you haven't tried it before, so you want me to be your guinea pig? Sasuke guessed, which made Naruto blink. Wow, how did you know? I know because you're an easy-to-read idiot, Sasuke said simply. The fist impacted with his face so fast that he hardly even registered it before stars exploded in front of his eyes, and he was sent flying, spinning in the air before smashing into a fence. He was lodged in the fence, hanging upside down, groaning, as the 3 kunoichi came out to see what the commotion was about. You haven't changed, you bastard. Insult me, will ya? Naruto barked. You've gotten faster. Sasuke muttered with a painful cough. Stronger, too. With that, Sasuke slipped out of the hole in the fence, to collapse unconscious on the ground. 5 hours later found Sasuke sitting shirtless in a healing chamber in Konoha's hospital. Tsunade was there, along with Sakura and Hinata. Naruto was behind Sasuke, drawing sealing formulas on Sasuke's body in his blood, which was seeping from a cut on his palm. This feels familiar, Sasuke muttered, sounding bored. It should, considering this seal is based on the one you already have, Naruto said, hard at work. Speaking of which, shouldn't you be removing the old one? No, I designed this seal to work on top of the Fujihuan, Naruto explained, before cursing, as the cut on his palm had healed for the 10th time since they started, which caused him to slice it open again with a kunai. He waited for more blood to dribble down to the tip of his finger before he continued. Leaving it intact should only make this seal stronger. Think of it kinda like a treasure in a chest. Instead of moving the treasure, you leave it in, and just put the chest in a bigger chest. I'm glad you consider me a treasure, Sasuke quipped. This proved to be a mistake, however, as he was sitting shirtless, and Naruto had an uninjured hand that was perfectly capable of slapping the bare skin on his back. Don't move, Naruto ordered as Sasuke flinched from the pain the back slap had caused. You don't want me to accidentally seal up your own chakra as well, do you? Sasuke blinked. You can do that? A smirk appeared on Naruto's face as he leaned to the side to look into Sasuke's eyes as the Uchiha's head turned to look at him. I guess we'll see, the blonde said happily, standing up. Because it's done. I'm having second thoughts about this, Sasuke announced as Naruto started going through hand seals. I don't want to do this anymore. I stop that. Go dem, don't let him, Juni 10 Fuin, 12-point seal. Naruto announced as he pressed his hand against the cursed seal. Steam started rising from under Naruto's hand as Sasuke gave a sudden yell of pain. His entire body tensed up as the sealing formula came alive and moved up his body to gather under Naruto's palm. Sasuke showed remarkable restraint during the entire process. The yell he gave at the start was the only sound he gave off, as his mouth snapped shut immediately after, and he spent the entire time gritting his teeth with his eyes closed, enduring the pain as best he could. Finally, the steam stopped, and Naruto removed his hand. Another seal had formed around and on top of the Fujihuan. There we go. Other than the pain you're feeling now, you shouldn't be bothered by the cursed seal again. Sasuke grunted, clutching at his shoulder. Are you telling me that I'll be stuck with this pain? Not at all, Naruto said with a shake of his head. It'll pass in a day or two. It's just burrowing down right now to really anchor itself to you. It should be dangerously hard to remove, too. Sasuke gave another grunt as Hinata hurried over to hand Sasuke his shirt. So, still gay? Naruto asked, which got him a strange look from Sasuke. Yes, and happily so. Good to know, Naruto said, patting Sasuke on the shoulder. I'm happy you're comfortable with your choice of lifestyle. What's up with you? Sasuke asked, still staring strangely at Naruto. You sound like you read that from some kind of book. Oh, yeah, I read a book on tolerance during my training trip, Naruto explained. And I realized that I haven't exactly been very supportive. The book said that such an attitude could be damaging for your already fragile psyche. So, I just want you to know I'm happy for you. With that, Naruto walked off to Tsunade, leaving Sasuke to put on his shirt, a barely noticeable pout on his face, and mutter, I'm not fragile. I was once this small? Naruto thought in surprise as he watched the various academy students running around outside the place of learning. Obviously, none of them were 12, since today was graduation day, but still. Naruto had been that tiny at one point in time? No wonder why none of the older teenagers took his threats of beating the crap out of them seriously. Oh, Naruto, eh? Naruto blinked and turned toward the source of the voice, to see a rather large man with brown hair and a goatee, dressed in the standard Konoha uniform, with a forehead protector that he wore as a bandana. It's been a long time, the man said, smiling brightly at Naruto, whose eyes widened. Yeah, and you haven't changed one bit, Daikoku-sensei. But you have, that's for damn sure. You've grown, kid, Funne no Daikoku said with a laugh. So, are you looking at any prospective students? Come again? Well, you're certainly powerful enough to be a Junin, if the rumors are true. I thought you might be checking out the potential, Daikoku said. You think I'll make Junin? Naruto asked in surprise. Oh yeah, I always knew you'd go far, kid. Really? Naruto asked with a smirk, raising an eyebrow. Didn't you once tell me that a no-good punk like me shouldn't even be in the academy? Daikoku laughed at that. Yeah, well, that was back when you were a no-good punk who shouldn't even be here, before you and Sasuke became friends. Now you're just a punk, which is good sometimes. Naruto had to chuckle at that. He couldn't really argue with that. He was a punk most of the time, at least in the eyes of the older generations. So then, what are you doing here, if not looking for prospective students? Daikoku asked. Saru is graduating today, and I thought I'd be here to congratulate him, Naruto explained, which made Daikoku blink in confusion. Saru? Konohamaru, Naruto clarified. Ah, well, good luck with your career as a chunin, Daikoku said, waving as he walked off. I suspect it will be very short. You'll probably be Junin when next we meet. Good luck handling the brats, Daikoku-sensei. Naruto stood there for another hour, realizing that he should probably have brought a book or something, before the bell was heard ringing, and a large group of newly graduated genin spilled out of the doors of the academy. Many parents had already gathered outside the academy, and they happily greeted and congratulated their children. Naruto spotted Konohamaru exiting, along with Udon and Moegi. His two friends waved at him and ran off to their parents, while Konohamaru headed straight for the exit, only to freeze when he saw Naruto grinning at him. Yo, Naruto said, raising his hand in greeting. Congratulations on graduating, Saru. Naruto ni-chan. Konohamaru exclaimed in surprise. You're back. Sure am. Just in time, too, Naruto said with a grin. How about some ramen to celebrate, eh? Ooh, awesome. Ni-chan, you're the best. And so, an hour later found Naruto and Konohamaru sitting at Ichiraku Ramen, Konohamaru telling Naruto about everything he had learned during Naruto's trip. And this technique, Konohamaru started, but was interrupted by a bop on the head from Naruto. Idiot, don't go telling people what your techniques do, even allies, without good reason, the blonde chided his somewhat apprentice. You never know if you might go up against them in a spar or the chunin exams, so don't go revealing them unless you absolutely have to. Secrecy is a ninja's greatest weapon, didn't you know? I know. Konohamaru muttered, crossing his arms with a pout. Naruto smiled softly at that, being greatly reminded of himself when he was 12. Even though Sasuke had beaten secrecy into his head, he had always wanted to show off how great he was. Oh, this is where you were, Naruto. I should have known. Naruto's head snapped around to stare at the new arrival, a bright smile appearing on his face. Kakashi-sensei. Yo! Kakashi greeted, raising his hand in a wave. Naruto hopped off his stool, grinning, and reached into one of his kunai pouched. Oh, good timing. I've got something for ya. Kakashi's visible eye widened in utter shock as Naruto fished a book out of his pocket and handed it to his teacher. Not just any book, though. A green book with the shape of a man on the front, sitting in a thinking pose. This is Ichiraku Tactics, Naruto said, sounding incredibly proud of himself. I helped co-author it, so I got a couple of copies. Savor that, since it hasn't even been released yet. Kakashi was silent as he slowly opened the book, and Naruto thought he could almost hear a choir singing somewhere. Must have been his imagination, though. Thank you, Naruto, Kakashi said, closing the book again. But I didn't come here for this. I've already contacted Sasuke and Hinata. We'll have our first team meeting in 3 years tomorrow morning at 6. You mean 10, right? Naruto asked with a smirk, which got him a chuckle from Kakashi. 6, Naruto. With that, Kakashi disappeared with a puff of smoke. Yeah, right. He just got a new Ichiraku. Of course he's gonna be late tomorrow. Naruto arrived at the training ground 2 hours late. He was pleased to see Hinata and Sasuke landing in the clearing at the same time. What he wasn't expecting, however, was to find Kakashi leaning against one of the stumps, his arms crossed as he gave his 3 former genin stern looks. So that's what it feels like, he muttered. Oh, sorry I'm late, sensei. Naruto said, giving a wave. You see, a black cat crossed my path, and I had to take the long way around. Yeah, sorry, Sasuke said. I got into a fist fight with an intolerant asswipe, and my clothes were torn, so I had to go back home and replace them. I didn't look where I was going, Hinata said softly, smiling. So I got lost on the road of life. Kakashi opened his mouth to speak, but then closed it with a snap. He repeated this about 4 times, then sighed and said, I don't know whether to be mad or proud. Kakashi sighed, then straightened up and turned fully to face his 3 students. Alright, kids, the Godem wants Team 7 back in action. Now, I already know Sasuke and Hinata's basic skills, but I have no idea how much you have grown, Naruto. So, we're going to spar. This will be interesting, Sasuke said to Hinata, who nodded as they both hopped off to sit on 2 of the stumps. Kakashi and Naruto moved to the center of the clearing and stood about 80 feet apart. Naruto blinked when he realized something. You don't have your book out, sensei. Not gonna read it? Nope. I think I should save the enjoyment for later, Kakashi said as he raised his hand to hook his thumb under his forehead protector. Actually, for some reason, I get the feeling I should take it a little seriously too. Kakashi raised his headband to uncover his Sharingan, which made Naruto grin. Oh, I get to see it so soon, eh? He asked, cracking his knuckles. Well, I'll have to make sure not to disappoint. Naruto started going through a chain of seals at an alarming rate, finishing by clapping his hands together. Futon. Atsudangan, wind element. Pressure bullet, he called out, his cheeks puffing out, before he blew an incredibly large ball of compressed air at his teacher, who only had time to go wide-eyed before he had to dodge out of the way. The ball of air tore up the ground as it passed, and when it hit the trees behind Kakashi, it sliced them up, carving a path into the woods. Futon ninjutsu? Kakashi thought in surprise. And he molded the chakra with such ease. Has he discovered an alignment with a 3rd element? Kakashi had to leap into the air to dodge another ball of air. Don't underestimate me, he told Naruto, who blew another ball at him. Kakashi flashed through seals as well, finishing in Tiger. Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu. Kakashi brought his hand to his mouth and exhaled a massive ball of fire, which charged straight into the Atsudangan. Instead of exploding as a rookie might have thought, the fireball wasn't even slowed down by the Futon Jutsu, absorbing it and growing in size as it smashed into the blonde Senju. You didn't really think I believe you'd let yourself get hit by that, did you? Kakashi asked as he landed, looking around. Now, where are? Kakashi stopped and leapt away as 2 hands burst out of the ground, grabbing at his ankles. He wasn't given pause, however, as another set of hands came out where he landed. He danced around the clearing as an amazing number of hands came out of the ground trying to catch him. When the hell did he have time to create so many Kage Bunshin? Kakashi thought in surprise, leaping into the air again to avoid yet another set of hands. These hands, however, suddenly turned into wood and extended, stretching up into the air and grabbing Kakashi's ankles. What? The hands flung him through the air, and another Naruto, no doubt the original, shot out of the ground and delivered a punch into Kakashi's face that sent him rocketing toward the ground, kicking up a massive amount of dust and forming a crater as he landed. "Hey, Kawarimi, eh?" Naruto asked as he landed. The dust cleared, to show nothing but splinters remaining of the log Kakashi had swapped out with. He turned around and grinned. "Really, sensei? You're hiding underground? That's my domain, you know. I'll give Yata the count of 3 to come out, before I force you out." 1. The ground burst behind Naruto, and Kakashi came shooting out of it, crossing the distance between them and grabbing Naruto from behind in a hold. "I'm good at hiding, Naruto. What you sensed was just a clone." Naruto grinned. "I know." This statement made Kakashi's eyes widen, and he let go of Naruto and jumped back just in time for Naruto to turn into wood, several wooden spikes shooting out of his body. Naruto shot out of the ground behind Kakashi and rushed at him, attempting to engage him in a taijutsu fight. Kakashi, however, wouldn't touch that shit with a 10-foot pole. "He honestly expects me to fight him?" Kakashi thought as he dodged several strikes. "Those fists are packed with chakra. Just getting grazed means I'm history." "Kakashi, don't be fooled," Sasuke called from his spot on the stump. "You know how much Naruto loves his clones." Kakashi didn't need further warning. His eyes went wide, and he ducked just in time to avoid a punch coming from behind. Naruto's punch connected with his clone, which exploded into splinters. "Damn it, Sasuke." Naruto barked at his best friend, who was just smirking at him. "I had him, you know. I don't want the spar to be too short," Sasuke defended. "Kakashi has only just started to learn not to underestimate you. He's going to get serious now." "Hey, true," Kakashi said with a small chuckle, which made Naruto turn around to face him. "I guess I was still treating you like a wet behind the ears genin. I'll start getting serious now, alright? You're not serious already?" Naruto asked in surprise, and Kakashi shook his head, which made the blonde grin widely. "Man, we sure hit the jackpot when it comes to Junin commanders. I must have faced at least 20 Junin during my training trip, and none of them have managed to stay awake against me for this long. And now I learn you're not even serious yet." "You seem happy, Naruto," Kakashi said with a smile, which only made Naruto grin wider. "Hell yeah, I'm happy. At this power level, that means you're a candidate for the Hokage position. Beating you means I'm one step closer." Kakashi chuckled at that and made a "come on" gesture. "Well then, make sure to beat me, because I have no interest in the seat." Naruto chuckled as he clapped his hands together, before flashing through seals. "Alright, sensei, time to learn why I gained the nickname Shizen no Kami, God of Nature, during my travels." In the Hokage's office, Tsunade suddenly looked up from her paperwork and looked over her shoulder to stare out the window. "Tsunade-sama?" Shizune questioned as Tsunade furrowed her brow. "I just got a strange feeling," she muttered. "Jiraiya, eh?" Jiraiya's head popped up from under the broken window, which had yet to be repaired. "How did you know I was here? Or better yet, how long have you known?" "Since you first showed up," Tsunade said with a shrug. "I was just enjoying the peace and quiet, so I didn't call out to you." "That's cold, Tsunade," Jiraiya muttered with a pout. Then, the pout was quickly replaced by a grin. "You can feel it, can't you?" "Yeah, what is that?" "It feels like chakra and yet, it's different. That's the thing about Naruto," Jiraiya said as he crossed his arms. "When he gets serious, he can't do stealth for shit. His chakra flares so much that it almost heats up, and the strange feeling you're getting is from that very chakra. It mingles with the earth and becomes one with it. So it's more reminiscent of nature chakra I use in my senjutsu, sage techniques. The kid's probably a natural at that. Then, he tends to do some flashy jutsu in order to scare the shit out of his opponent." In the distance, the three of them suddenly saw a massive forest shoot up, rising high above the forest surrounding the village. It was massive, too, probably enough to cover the training ground Team 7 was so fond of. "Like so," Jiraiya said with a gesture for the spontaneous tree growth. "Naruto is sparring with someone strong, huh?" Kakashi said he wanted 2 days to get a feel for Naruto's abilities, and to get the team reaccustomed to teamwork, Tsunade explained, which made Jiraiya grin again. "Guess they're both serious now." It was 3 hours later that Kakashi sat on the ground, panting heavily with his back against a tree. He was sweaty, dirty, and his clothes had tears in them here and there. His power is unnatural. Couple that with his freakish stamina. I can't compete with that. And his elemental affinity is insane. As soon as I try to use one strong against the element he's using, he'll just switch. I can't engage him in taijutsu, and he dispels any genjutsu I cast on him. Kakashi closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Calm down. My lack of stamina is my greatest weakness. Can't afford wasting energy on breathing so heavily. Well, at least Naruto is kind enough to give me a breather. I find it hard to believe I'd be able to hide from him, especially in this Force the Created. At least I've gotten a couple of hits in myself. My speed is greater than his, that's for damn sure. And I can outsmart him easily enough. The problem is his adaptability. As soon as I get him in a trap, he adapts and adjusts his strategy. No wonder the Senju clan was so feared during the Warring States period. Naruto is probably on the same level as the Shodai Hokage was at that age, if not stronger. Kakashi couldn't help but chuckle as he thought about it. And given how Sasuke is probably at the same level Madara was at that age. He chuckled again. Those two are going to be unstoppable on the battlefield if they were together. Damn forces of nature. And if that wasn't enough, Sasuke is aligned with fire and lightning. That makes a full set. And I understand Hinata's studies with the Godem has earned her a massive amount of medical knowledge. Damn, I have a fine team, don't I? Well, Kakashi uttered as he got to his feet, brushing dust off his backside. I guess it's time to get back to it. Naruto is injured, so it should be a bit easier. When Kakashi reached what was originally Team 7's clearing with the 3 stumps, but which was now a thick forest, he found Naruto sitting on a wooden chair that had seemingly sprouted from the ground. He was panting slightly, and was about as dirty as Kakashi himself. Yo, Naruto said, raising his bloodied hand in a wave. Come out of hiding, did you? All rested up? Yep, Kakashi said with a nod. Well, not as much as I would have liked, but I thought it'd be best to finish this before you bleed out. The cycloptic Junin went wide-eyed when he saw the tear in the side of Naruto's flak vest. Kakashi had managed to graze him with a raikiri earlier, used at Naruto's urging, of course, and Naruto had been bleeding heavily, evidenced by how the left leg of Naruto's pants were drenched with blood. But the wound, it was gone. How? Naruto looked down at his non-existent wound. Oh yeah, it's a technique I developed after reading about Tsunade Ba-chan's Suzu Saisei, Creation Rebirth. It's kind of unrefined right now, so it uses up a lot of chakra, but it's great for wounds that bleed like crazy. And here I thought you'd be easier to fight, being injured and all. Kakashi muttered, sighing deeply. This made Naruto chuckle as he leaned back in his chair. On that subject, you look beat, sensei, he commented, whistling. Maybe we should call it quits for today? As you probably know, I'm ready to fight for another 3 hours, while you look dead on your feet. Your stamina has always been your greatest weakness, after all. Kakashi chuckled. You're probably right, Naruto. In a normal fight, I can go for at least 12 hours, but you sure made me work up a sweat. I'm torn between embarrassment and pride. Sasuke, Hinata. The two Chunin called blurred into view between them. Hinata went wide-eyed when she saw how beat up Naruto and Kakashi were. Sasuke just looked annoyed, however. Damn it, Naruto, he muttered, glaring at the blonde. Because you went overboard, we couldn't watch the show. Hey, sorry, Naruto said, scratching his head. Well, that concludes our spar, Kakashi said, panting slightly as he covered his Sharingan again. Hinata, do you think you could help with my injuries before I continue? Why yes, sensei. Hinata hurried over, and Naruto frowned, furrowing his brow. Oi, you should know you can't hide from me by now, he called out, and within seconds, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Shizune walked into view. Tsunade and Shizune were looking around in awe, while Jiraiya grinned. I wasn't trying to hide, you know. Just waiting for the opportune moment to show up. Yeah, right, you 3 have been watching me for the last hour and a half, Naruto muttered. In any case, Tsunade spoke up, looking to Kakashi. What do you think? Well, he's in excellent shape, Kakashi said, scratching the back of his head with an embarrassed chuckle. Would have beaten me if we had kept fighting, if only through attrition. More than ready to get back to it, that's for sure. Very good, Tsunade said with a nod. Then Team 7 has permission to return to active duty. Senju Naruto, Uchiha Sasuke, Hyuga Hinata. From this moment on, Hitaki Kakashi is once more your team leader and commanding officer. Any objections? When all three shook their heads, Tsunade looked to Kakashi. Then, Kakashi, I'll leave them with you. Roger, Kakashi said, nodding as Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Shizune blurred away. Alright, guys, tomorrow we will be doing some teamwork exercises to once more get a feel for each other. What? Naruto barked, and Kakashi was quick to raise his hands in a placating manner. Now, I know you're eager to start doing missions with the team again, but you really put me through the ringer today. I need to recuperate, after all. TCH. Naruto uttered as he crossed his arms. I'd forgotten how easily you guys get tired. Chapter 12. Hell no. Kakashi, Sasuke, and Hinata all tensed up at Naruto's protest as they stood in the mission office, having just been assigned a mission by Tsunade, who immediately glared at him. What kind of a response is that, brat? We're a team comprised of a Junin and 3 Chunin, Naruto said, glaring right back. Don't waste resources assigning us a damn C rank. As much as I agree with you, Sasuke muttered as he leaned in, the Godem can be terrifying if you act like this. Naruto, listen. Tsunade started, but was interrupted when the doors slammed open. Trouble. Godem-sama. A Chunin from the Deciphering Corps yelled as she barged into the room. What is it? Tsunade asked, blinking. Suna's case cage has been taken by an organization called Akatsuki, the Chunin exclaimed. We just received the message. The case cage. Naruto muttered. Gaara, eh? Right, Tsunade said, closing her eyes in thought. Well then, Team Kakashi, I'll tell you your new mission. You are to go immediately to Sanagakure no Sato, find out the situation, and relay it to Konoha. After that, follow the orders of Suna and back them up. Hey, sounds a bit more interesting than a C rank, that's for sure. Naruto said with a grin, to which Sasuke smirked. Seems your luck holds up even after all this time, he commented. When do we leave? ASAP, Tsunade said, and Team 7 nodded, before leaving the mission office. It was no more than 15 minutes later that Team 7 stood at the west gate, ready to head off. It's our first mission in a while, and it's an important one, Kakashi said, his hands in his pockets. Here's hoping it goes well. As Kakashi said, it's very important that this mission is a success, Tsunade, standing at the gate with them, said with her arms crossed. Don't worry, Ba-chan, Naruto said, giving a lazy salute. We'll get Gaara back. Yo, Naruto, came Jiraiya's voice as the Sannin landed in front of them. Going on a mission? Tsunade, I have news. Suna's case cage, I know, I'm just about to send these brats to get him back. Tsunade interrupted with a gesture for Team 7. Jiraiya blinked as he looked at them, then walked over to whisper to Tsunade. You do know about the thing between Naruto and Akatsuki, right? He can handle it, Tsunade said firmly. I see. Then, one last talk, Jiraiya said as he walked up to Naruto. Now, Brad, I know you're strong and all, but this is Akatsuki you're going to deal with. Strategy has never been your strong point, so don't go rushing in head first. If not Sasuke, follow Kakashi's lead, alright? Yeah, Naruto said, waving him off. Right, then, Jiraiya said, straightening up. Kakashi, he's all yours. Make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. Right, Naruto barked suddenly. Let's go, then. With that, Naruto's legs tensed up. Cracks were heard coming from the ground, before he suddenly disappeared with a crack like thunder, leaving only a cloud of dust behind. Hey, man's gotten fast, I admit, Sasuke said with a smirk. Hinata, sensei, try to keep up. With that said, Sasuke blurred away as well. Tamari, Suna Junin, was having a rather pleasant walk back to Suna. There wasn't even a gust of wind, the sun was shining, and the trees were providing her with shade whenever she needed it. Plus, she was in allied territory, so she didn't have to worry about an attack. Therefore, it came as quite the shock to her when she was blown over by the wind pressure caused by a human missile, which came to an immediate stop in front of her. Landing on her bum painfully, Tamari glared up at the person, only for her eyes to widen when she saw a head of golden hair, and a silvery fur collar. You, Tamari-san, Senju Naruto said with a grin. Fancy meeting you here. Good timing, too. What are you doing here? You're going too fast, came Uchiha Sasuke's voice as the boy blurred into view next to Naruto. Save some energy. It's a long trip. So, Tamari said, pushing herself to her feet, handsome and whiskers together again, eh? Naruto blinked at that, then jutted his thumb toward Sasuke. He's whiskers, right? Tamari-san, Kakashi said as he landed next to them with Hinata. Good thing we found you. We have news. News? A few hours ago, we got a report in that Tsuna's case cage, Gaara, has been defeated and abducted by Akatsuki, Kakashi said seriously, making Temari's eyes widen. We have been sent to help find him. Gaara was. Slowly, Temari's shock melted away, to be replaced by a frown. I had a bad feeling earlier. It'll take 3 days to get to Tsuna from here, Kakashi continued. Let's hurry. Right. With that, everyone leapt off. Hey, Naruto, Sasuke spoke up as they leapt from tree to tree. It's true what Jiraiya said to the Hokage. The Akatsuki are after you too. Is it really? Don't you start as well, Naruto interrupted. They may be after me, they may be stronger than me. Maybe I'm nothing but an ant to them. But they sure as hell won't get me without the fight of their lives. I'm not gonna run from them. I suppose that even if you run from them, a confrontation is pretty much inevitable, Kakashi agreed. But listen to Jiraiya. Don't just rush in if we encounter the Akatsuki. They're S rank for a reason. That's cool, I'm not worried, Naruto said with a small grin, glancing at Sasuke. After all, I have him to back me up. Sasuke smirked at that. That much faith in me, huh? Not all that much. I just figured that I'll be softening up any enemy we encounter enough for you to finish them off. Despite the insult, a slight grin appeared on Sasuke's face as he glanced at Naruto. Glad to see you haven't lost confidence in yourself. Naruto's grin faded slightly as his thoughts drifted from his ego. This pisses me off, though, he admitted. If they were after me for me, and Gaara for Gaara, I wouldn't be as pissed. But they want something we really didn't have any control over. So? Sasuke asked. Well, to them, Gaara and I are just obstacles in the way of their true goals. They even have to keep us alive to extract the Biju, Naruto continued, gritting his teeth. The thought of that happening to me, no matter how slim the chances are. Fuck that. If they're gonna fight me, they should prepare to fight Senju Naruto, not the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. I didn't think I was that bad. Naruto blinked, and found himself inside his subconscious, standing in front of Kurama's cage. His body was moving on autopilot, considering that he hadn't tripped on a branch and broken his neck. What are you on about? Behind the bars, Kurama grinned. Aren't you the one who's always going on about how we're in this together? And now you don't consider us partners anymore? Don't be an idiot, Naruto grumbled. I just don't like that they focus solely on you. I'm not an obstacle in front of you, you know. I'm a living, breathing person. What would you say if the roles were reversed? If the roles were reversed, I would have released you from my stomach and eaten you a long time ago, so that wouldn't be an issue, Kurama said with a shrug, laying down and grinning wider. But, as you said, I'm in this too. If it turns out that you can't defeat your enemy, I'm gonna fight to survive, and I don't care if you survive along with me. Same old story, Naruto said with a small smirk. You may talk like that, but we both know I've grown on you. Kurama just scoffed and looked away. Ruto. In the real world, Naruto blinked and looked to Sasuke. Sorry, I was talking to Kurama. What is it? Hinata was asking you a question. Naruto looked to the third member of their team, raising an eyebrow. What do you need, Hinata? Hinata giggled at that. It's a coincidence, really. I was just saying that I've read about Jinchuriki being able to communicate with the demons they hold, and I was asking if it was true. I guess you just answered that. Yeah, I can. But he's a grumpy bastard most of the time, like I've just woken him from an awesome nap. Gaara's brother, Kankuro, had apparently attempted to stop the Akatsuki, and had been poisoned by the famous Tsuna puppeteer Akasuna no Sasori. That was why Team 7 was now standing in an emergency room with several Tsuna shinobi, including 2 old and very respected retired ninja, one of whom was the infamous Chiyo, the grandmother of Sasori. Man, our girl's grown on us, Naruto said, standing with his arms crossed as he watched Hinata treat Kankuro with an incredible amount of skill, putting a cut in his side and pulling the poison out of his body with her chakra. This must come as a big surprise to you, since you've been gone for so long, but I've watched her grow, so I'm not too shocked, Sasuke said, also crossing his arms. She's treated my injuries more than once. Your injuries? Naruto asked curiously. Both from missions and from sparring with Kakashi. He's not you, but he can still give me a good beating sometimes, Sasuke said with a shrug. Even though he easily gets tired, and has to spend a few days recovering in the hospital after he's fought me. You know, I'm standing right here, Kakashi muttered with a frown hidden behind his mask. How about some respect for your teacher? I did say you can give me a beating, didn't I? Well, I'm back now, so now you can look forward to taking a beating without the satisfaction of putting your opponent in the hospital doing so, Naruto said, a grin spreading on his face. You'll have to live with getting the crap beaten out of you without putting so much as a scratch on me. Hinata exhaled slowly as she healed the cuts in Kankuro's body before smiling softly at everyone. He should be all right now. I removed all the poison from his body. But, if we're going up against the creator of it, I will need some time to make an antidote. Chio sighed heavily at that. Well, I suppose I'll have to be the one to show you to the greenhouse. In the meantime, there's something I would like to ask, Kakashi said, looking to Baki, who was also in the room. What came of the pursuit of the Akatsuki after the attack? Kankuro went after them alone, Baki said grimly. There were no others. Then, have we completely lost them? Yes, we have. Well, could you please guide me to where Kankuro-kun was fighting? Kakashi said. Though I might not seem it, I am an expert at pursuit. Even if a small amount of their scent is left behind. That is not necessary, came a pained voice, making everyone turn to look at Kankuro, who was awake and slowly sitting up. There are two enemies. One abducted Gaara. You should be able to follow Gaara's scent. Even assuming they split up, the other caught a bit of their clothing on Karasu's hand. Well then, no time to just sit around, Naruto said, crossing his arms. Let's go, boys and girls. Before that, Kakashi said, looking to Kankuro. May we hear more about Akatsuki, please? So, an hour later they were ready to head out. Hinata had made 3 antidotes against Sasori's poison, so they were set on that front. Naruto could heal quickly, especially with Kurama helping him, but he had no idea how he'd do against a poison that only someone on Tsunade's level could heal. I'm going too, came Temari's voice as she approached Team 7 when they got ready to leave. Tamari, came Chio's ancient voice from above, making them look up to see the old woman standing on the village wall. Stay here and work on the defense of the country border. From the shinobi of Suna, I am more than enough. But, Chio Bazuma, don't treat me like an old woman. Chio barked, jumping off the wall, much to everyone's shock. Even more surprising was when she landed with a thump, but still looked up with a surprisingly calm look on her face. I've wanted to give my cute grandson some love for a while now. Right, then, let's head off. Naruto said. Let's not waste any more time. If you're gonna dawdle, Sasuke and I will scout ahead. With that, without waiting for the go-ahead, Naruto dashed off. Sasuke smirked to himself. True, no time like the present, he said, before dashing off as well. The Uchiha quickly caught up with Naruto, having always been faster than him if pushed. So, what have you got? It's like Gaara's leaking, Naruto said as they ran. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but he's left a chakra trail. Not his own, but the Shukaku's. You didn't fight it at the Chunin exams, Sasuke commented. How do you know what it feels like? Please, that chakra could be felt from miles away back then. Besides, I've met Gaara a few times in my travels. He's been helping me handle Kurama's chakra. You've become friends? Sasuke asked in surprise. Well, not really friends, I think. Well, maybe, I don't know. Not like you and me, but still, I'd count on him in a pinch, Naruto explained with a shrug, which made Sasuke frown. You know, you should think about these things a bit harder. I have other things on my mind right now. Sasuke hummed to himself. They had been running for near a day straight now, only stopping to rest twice, and that was only 5-minute breaks. Think we should wait for Kakashi and the others to catch up? I think we can handle any threat that shows up, Naruto said confidently, which made Sasuke chuckle. Are you saying that because you actually believe that, or because you want to believe that? I believe it, Naruto confirmed. In any case, the others are just about an hour behind us. If whoever we encounter becomes too much, we can hold them off for at least that long until backup shows up. You're actually thinking ahead? Sasuke asked in surprise. Wow, that training trip was good for, hold it, someone's up ahead. Naruto barked suddenly as they reached a clearing, coming to a stop. You know, I sometimes think I have too big a mouth. Sasuke didn't respond. Instead, he had just settled for glaring at the person on the other side of the clearing. With his Akatsuki robe billowing in the wind, Uchiha Itachi was giving the duo his usual emotionless stare, his Sharingan blazing as always. Uchiha Itachi. Sasuke growled out, his rage evident to everyone. Keep your eyes open, Sasuke, Naruto muttered, narrowing his eyes. Something is off here. What do you mean? I mean, he doesn't have nearly as much chakra as he did 3 years ago, Naruto explained. He looks and feels real enough, but I don't think this is the real thing. I can't explain it because it doesn't feel like a clone. Henge, then? No, the chakra is his. This is Uchiha Itachi, yet it isn't. It's been a while, Naruto-kun, Sasuke, Itachi said before Sasuke could respond to that enigmatic statement. Don't look into his eyes, Sasuke said as his Sharingan flared to life. You don't have to tell me that, Naruto muttered, keeping his gaze fixed on Itachi's feet. I've fought you enough times to know that. Naruto, I don't care if you fight alongside me. I've come to terms with that possibility, but the killing blow is mine, Sasuke said, feeling confident enough to glance at Naruto, knowing that the blonde would warn him if Itachi decided to move. A bit early for that, don't you think? Naruto muttered. Let's hold off on arguing about the killing blow until he's down. Slowly, Itachi raised his hand and pointed at Naruto. I'll kindly ask you to come with me, Naruto-kun. Naruto's eyes widened at that, and he immediately put his hands in a ram seal. Kai. The genjutsu that had started weaving around Naruto was suddenly dispelled, and the blonde gritted his teeth. Sasuke. Yeah. Sasuke rushed forward, drawing his sword and lighting it on fire as he reached Itachi, swiping at his older brother, who dodged with remarkable ease. He didn't let up, however, and came at Itachi with swing after swing, never giving him a moment to breathe. Finally, Itachi played right into Sasuke's hands, leaping up into the air to avoid his sword and going through a set of hand seals. He was surprised, however, when he saw Sasuke look up at him with a smirk. His eyes widened in realization when a shadow was cast on his face, and he looked up to see Naruto above him, leg raised, his heel coming down toward Itachi at an alarming speed. Gotcha! Naruto barked as his heel impacted with Itachi's face and sent him rocketing to the ground, only to frown immediately as he landed next to Sasuke. Damn, Kawarimi. Sense him? His chakra is all over the place, Naruto muttered, still frowning. It's hard to get a fix on him. Back to back. Naruto nodded and turned, putting his back against Sasuke's to make sure they had a 360 degrees visual, and that no one would get between them. The blonde Senju's brow furrowed in concentration as he sharpened his senses, trying to detect the source of the chakra flooding the area, only for his eyes to widen when he finally detected it. Sasuke, jump. The 3 years apart hadn't affected their teamwork in the slightest, as both teens leapt into the air at exactly the same time, and Sasuke knew exactly what Naruto was going to do, because his arms reached back and wrapped around Naruto's midsection as the blonde went through hand seals. Suiden. Suikyu no Jutsu, water element, water sphere technique. Naruto spat out a large amount of water, which formed a sphere around him and Sasuke just as the ground underneath them exploded, a massive fireball bursting out of it and heading straight for them. The fireball smashed into the water sphere and launched them higher into the air. The water steamed from the heat, but the fire didn't break through. Still, though, Naruto had to admit that Itachi had packed an amazing amount of chakra into that fireball. Alright, Naruto, Sasuke said once the fire died down and the water sphere disappeared, to show Itachi standing in a crater beneath them. Sasuke released Naruto and pulled himself down, flipping in the air so that he planted his feet against Naruto's, his sword catching on fire again. Let's do this. Right, Naruto said, his legs tensing up. He blew a large amount of air out of his mouth, which enveloped Sasuke's sword, strengthening the flames, before he pushed off, sending Sasuke rocketing toward Itachi, whose eyes widened. Kaden. Entei 2, fire element, Flame Emperor's blade. Sasuke called out as he slashed at Itachi. The slash sent a massive arch of intense fire down at the renegade Uchiha, slicing straight through him and leaving a massive gash in the earth, about 90 feet long. Sasuke gritted his teeth. Another Kawarimi. In the air, Naruto created a clone and used it as a springboard to send himself shooting down toward the earth, rearing his fist back. I got him, he exclaimed, slamming his fist down into the ground and shattering it in an 80-foot radius, the shockwave sending Sasuke stumbling. Beneath Naruto was a visibly surprised Itachi, who had been hiding underground. The surprise didn't last long, however, as his eyes locked with Naruto. "Got you," he said softly, making Naruto's eyes widen as Itachi's eyes changed shape, the tomos merging to form a three-point shuriken shape. All it took was a blink of the eye for the world around Naruto to change. Everything turned black, save for the sky, which turned a blood red, a black moon high in the sky. Before Naruto could react, wooden poles shot out of the ground behind him, sprouting chains that wrapped around his wrists and pulled him into them. "Welcome to the world of Tsukuyomi," came Itachi's voice as the Uchiha walked around Naruto to stand in front of him. He, like the rest of the world, was black, his features outlined in white. "Space and time are under my control in this world. In here, I am God. There is no escaping this. You bastard," Naruto growled, straining against the chains. To his amazement, they didn't break. "This is just an illusion, Naruto-kun. In here, you do not possess the great strength you have in the real world." "Well then," Naruto said, a small grin appearing on his face. "I'll just have to wait for Sasuke to break it, won't I?" "Sasuke has become very strong, not to mention fast," Itachi admitted, nodding slowly as a katon formed in his hand. "However, I can torture you for 3 days in here, and not even a second will pass in the real world. We'll have plenty of time before Sasuke reaches us." Itachi took a step toward Naruto, who tensed up as the Uchiha raised the katana. "Now, for the next 72 hours, you will be continuously stabbed by this katana." Itachi reared his arm back, but then suddenly stopped when the world was flooded by an intense chakra. The world around them changed color, being flooded with a fiery orange. "What the?" Itachi mumbled softly, looking behind him, only for his eyes to widen when a figure took shape. It was a massive orange fox, standing just a few yards away from him, its 9 tails swirling behind it. It lowered its massive head to glare at Itachi. "You're a powerful Uchiha. But you have clearly never faced a Jinchuriki before, have you?" Kurama growled out, which made Naruto grin. "Man, your timing is amazing, Kurama," he said happily. "Clearly not," Itachi said, ignoring Naruto. "But I do know the power of the Sharingan over the Biju." Itachi was obviously surprised when Kurama didn't obey his mental commands upon seeing the blazing Sharingan, but instead simply grinned at the Uchiha. "Usually, that would probably work," Kurama admitted. "Those accursed eyes are powerful, no doubt. So, I guess this is one time I am actually grateful to have a Senju as a host." Kurama grinned wider and raised his massive paw, then sent it crashing down on Itachi. Naruto blinked, and suddenly found himself in the real world again, staring at a surprised Itachi. Taking advantage of this, Naruto formed a hand seal, and a wooden clone sprouted from his body, launching itself at Itachi and wrapping its arms around him. "Sasuke, do it!" Naruto barked, leaping away as Sasuke came charging at them, a Chidori chirping in his hand. "You don't have to tell me," Sasuke said, flashing forward and slamming his hand into Naruto's clone's back, piercing right through it and into Itachi, whose eyes widened in both surprise and pain. "Can't be this easy," Sasuke said, staring at the pained Itachi. "Naruto, look around for the real one." Naruto formed a half-ram seal and concentrated, his eyebrows shooting up in surprise. "From what I can sense, it was this easy. I can't feel him," he admitted as Itachi's body slackened, held up only by Naruto's now dead Moku Bunshin. "Still, something doesn't feel right," Sasuke muttered as his Chidori died down, and he pulled his hand out, only for his eyes to widen. "This is what?" Naruto asked, walking over to Sasuke, to go wide-eyed as well. Itachi's body was morphing before their eyes. His clothes didn't change, but his hairstyle and facial features changed to someone completely different, a man with a small beard on his chin. "That's not Itachi," Sasuke muttered, narrowing his eyes. "What's your analysis?" "Like I said, this felt wrong from the start. He didn't have as much chakra as Itachi usually did, but he had Itachi's techniques, and could even use the Sharingan." Naruto muttered, frowning and shaking his head. "I can't make heads or tails of it. It's like someone put a third of Itachi's chakra into this body to make. I don't know, some kind of living clone, or something." "But that's not possible," Sasuke said. The only technique that could possibly be similar would be the Edo Tensei, but this was no Edo Tensei. And yet we're looking at a real human body that had been turned into some kind of clone. Naruto said, none of his usual joking attitude remaining. Whoever did this, he's good. And this guy was no doubt sent to delay us, Sasuke said, perking up. We don't have time to waste here. We can theorize on the way. Yeah, the two jumped away, leaving the body there. At least it could be used as a marker for Kakashi and the others to follow. I need to talk to Kurama, Naruto said as they ran and blinked, before suddenly finding himself in front of Kurama's cage once more. So, what was that about? The fox inside the cage was laying down with his eyes closed. One of the eyes slowly opened to glance at Naruto. What do you mean? How could you pop up inside the Tsukuyomi? How could you resist the Sharingan? Naruto wanted to know, which made Kurama chuckle. As I told the Uchiha, I guess I'm grateful to have a Senju host, the fox said, sitting up and grinning down at Naruto. And I guess I'm a bit grateful to your old man as well. Meaning? Meaning, the seal holding me was altered by the Yondaime, Kurama explained. A sliver of my chakra is always floating into your own chakra system. Probably as a way to teach you how to instinctively get used to and manipulate my chakra, I don't know. In any case, that is a two-way opening, you know. The Yondaime didn't account for it, of course, but it's there. Naruto's eyes widened in realization. You mean that some of my chakra is mingling with yours? Yes, Kurama said with a nod. Our chakras have bonded on some levels. While this will make it easier for you to control my chakra, it will also make it easier for me to take over your body, should you ever be foolish enough to let me out of here. Back on topic, the only one who has been able to control me, other than an Uchiha, has been the Shodai Hokage. His chakra is potent, and he has always been able to resist the Sharingan, no matter how powerful. That resistance has been passed on to me, thanks to you. Then how come I couldn't resist the Sharingan? Naruto asked, furrowing his brow. I don't know, Kurama said with a shrug as he lay down again. You expect me to know everything? I'm a mass of chakra, not a ninjutsu expert. I know things only from what I have experienced. I guess you just weren't mentally prepared to face the Mangekyo Sharingan. A grin once more spread on Kurama's face as he sneered at Naruto. Or you're just too damn retarded to ever be able to put up a defense against it. Hey, Naruto barked, flipping the fox off. If it wasn't for the fact that I'm grateful you saved me, I'd come in there and kick your ass for that. Kurama grinned wider. Bring it, brat. Why, you? Naruto gritted his teeth, but then calmed down and turned his back on Kurama, a small grin appearing on his face. Hey, thanks, Kurama. Kurama just grunted in response. Naruto's consciousness returned to the real world, and he couldn't help but smirk to himself, something Sasuke didn't fail to notice. What are you so happy about? Nothing, I just realized that I've got another advantage over you. Hey, Sasuke muttered, frowning. Is the fox helping you? You could say that. Anything he can do to help you isn't an advantage of yours. Don't take credit for stuff he does. Naruto laughed. Are you saying that because you don't want me to be more awesome than I already am? Or because you want to give Kurama credit where credit is due? Sasuke's frown deepened, and he refrained from answering, instead simply looking ahead and speeding up, which made Naruto laugh again. The duo reached their goal, a wide river with a cave that had been blocked off by a massive boulder. Naruto's senses told him that Gaara, along with two massive chakra sources, were behind the boulder. Also in there was a large gathering of chakra, including Itachi's, but it was like their bodies weren't there, only their chakra. So, we have no idea what's behind this. Sasuke concluded after hearing Naruto's report. We have some idea. We know that only two shinobi are in there in person, Naruto said with a shrug as he looked up at the seal that had been placed on the boulder. That's a 5-point barrier seal. Pretty sophisticated stuff. Naruto-kun, Sasuke-kun. The two looked over their shoulders to see Team Gaia landing on the river, much to their surprise. Gaia was grinning widely at them, Pakun sitting on his shoulder. Yo, Guy-sensei, Naruto said, raising his hand in greeting. Where's Kakashi? Guy asked. We ran ahead. He'll be here with the others soon, Sasuke said. It's a good thing you showed up, though. We need help taking down this barrier. And how do we do that? Guy asked, looking to Naruto. A seal like this is anchored by 5 seal tags, with 4 of them anchoring this one to the spot, Naruto said as he looked up at the seal again. I don't see any booby traps, so removing it should be easy, provided the anchors are removed at the same time. But where are the other tags, then? Tenten asked, and Sasuke glanced at Neji. Hey, Neji, could you have a look? Right, Neji said as his Byakugan flared to life. He appeared to be looking straight ahead, but anyone who knew the Byakugan would know that he was looking everywhere but straight ahead. Found them. On top of a rock about 500 meters northeast of here. On the trunk of a tree, on a river bank, 350 meters southeast. On a wall of rock about 650 meters northwest. And inside a grove about 800 meters southwest. Right, Guy said, taking off his backpack and fishing out a wireless radio from it. If it's that range, we'll use these radios. While we're taking Neji's directions, we can keep in communication, and we'll find the locations of the tags. As Team Guy was putting on the radios, 3 people landed on the river next to them. Kakashi, Hinata, and Chiyo had finally arrived. Took you long enough, Naruto said with a smirk. You didn't get here as fast as I'd expected, Kakashi said softly. Ran into a bit of trouble on the way? Yeah, Naruto said with a nod. Anyway, Guy said, having put on his radio, speed-wise, my team is faster. The frequency is 174. Wait for our signal. Right, Kakashi said, fishing a wireless radio out of his kunai pouch. And while we're waiting, tell me what you feel inside, Naruto. Only 2 shinobi now, Naruto said as Team Guy dashed off. Earlier, there were 7 more in there, but they were just faint signals. They're gone now, though. And Gaara. Naruto trailed off, and Sasuke glanced at him. Can't sense him? No. Okay, Kakashi said softly, leaping up onto the stone. When I remove this seal, we'll break in with a button hook entry. Naruto, you breach. Naruto nodded and got into position in front of the boulder, while Sasuke and Hinata took their place on one side, and Chiyo took her place on the other side. Ready, Kakashi muttered, gripping the seal. Go. He ripped it off, and Naruto charged forward, rearing his fist back before smashing it into the boulder, which exploded into tiny pieces. Kakashi made a hand signal, and the 5 of them rushed in, Chiyo and Kakashi hugging the wall to the left, and Team 7 hugging the wall to the right, keeping their backs safe as they surveyed the cave. The 2 Akatsuki members were at the back of the cave. A young-looking blonde man was sitting on the unmoving body of Gaara, with a large bird that appeared to be made out of clay standing next to him. The other Akatsuki member was a large hunched-over man whose hair had been styled into cornrows. Half his face had been covered by a cloth mask, the bottom of which had been torn off, probably by Kankuro's puppet. Well then, the blonde man said with a smirk. Which of you is the Jinchuriki, I wonder, HN? Naruto, seal their escape path, Kakashi ordered, to which Naruto nodded and flashed through hand seals, ending in snake. The cave started shaking as thick wooden poles burst out of the ground around the walls, stretching upward and forming a cage that spanned the entire cave. Mokuton ninjutsu? The blonde spoke, sounding a bit intrigued, judging by the smile on his face. I guess he's the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, then, HN. Chiyo Bazama? Kakashi muttered, glancing at Chiyo. That is not Sasori's real body, Chiyo said, looking grim. It's just a puppet. He is hiding inside it. This made everyone's eyes widen. Puppeteering wasn't too common, but even so, none of them had ever heard of a puppeteer hiding inside their puppet. Because they're open to attack when controlling their puppets, puppeteers are weak in close combat. So, that puppet circumvents that weakness. The puppet becomes armor, and at the same time a weapon. That's Sasori's favorite puppet, Hirako. I know it well. Then, Hinata mumbled nervously. Then what should we do? First off, we have to get Sasori out of Hirako if we want to be able to do anything. The most terrifying thing about the puppets are the unpredictable traps, mechanisms that can launch from anywhere. And in all likelihood, they're all poisoned, right? Sasuke surmised, which made the blonde laugh. Sasori no Dana, they sure know a lot about you, don't they? Think I'm as famous? Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked, glancing at Kakashi, who was narrowing his eyes at the blonde Akatsuki member. Never seen him before, the Cyclops concluded, making the blonde twitch. Hey, you really haven't heard of me? You have no sense of art then, HN. I'm Deidara. Deidara, damn it. Never seen him, but I've heard of him, Kakashi said. He's from Iwa. From Kankuro's report, I guess he's the one who uses explosives. Alright, How are we going to do this? Sasuke asked, drawing his sword. Split them up, Kakashi said. Sasuke, you're with me. Hinata, Naruto, followed Chiyo Basama's lead. Well then, I guess I'll leave the Jinchuriki to you, Dana, Deidara said, jumping up on his bird. His hand came out of his sleeve, holding what looked like a miniature clay bird, identical to the one he was standing on. The bird moved on its own, taking flight and shooting straight past the Konoha shinobi into the wooden bars blocking the entrance. When it impacted, it exploded, blowing a massive hole in the wooden cage. It's for the best, I suppose, Sasuke concluded as the giant clay bird took flight, before shooting off out of the cave, with Kakashi and Sasuke giving chase. Now that they were left alone, Sasori gave a chuckle. It's a good thing there are 3 of you. Even if I have to leave the Jinchuriki alive, the other 2 of you will put my puppet collection to an even 300. Sasori reached up and pulled his cloak off, revealing his body. He was standing on all fours, his back covered by a thick shield in the shape of some kind of oni, demon, with a long bladed tail sticking out of its mouth. On his left arm, he had some kind of thick cylindrical gauntlet with several rods sticking out of it. Chiyo hummed at the sight. It would seem the shape is slightly different from the Hirako I knew long ago, she said grimly. Firstly, that shell on his back wasn't there before. And that must have strengthened his defense. I've also never seen that left hand before. Furthermore, he might have redesigned his most important traps. So, we're running in blind is what you're saying? Naruto muttered, sighing. Nothing's ever easy, is it? What should we do? Hinata mumbled. To defeat Sasori, we first have to take out Hirako. While neither you nor I have the power needed to destroy it, Naruto-kun does. Plus, I have a bit of a resistance against poisons, and I heal pretty fast, Naruto confirmed, nodding. I'll get close to him and smash that Hirako thing, but it'll happen fast, and I don't have a Sharingan to help me react, so I'll need you 2 to play some interference. I know how much puppeteers like senbons, and I don't really feel like getting turned into a pincushion. I'll help where I can with the Jukin, Naruto-kun, Hinata said softly, to which Naruto nodded. Then, however, he perked up and looked down at himself, then at Chiyo. Oh, so that's your plan, old lady? It's what I'm here for, she said with a nod. Let's go, then. With that, Naruto dashed forward. Sasori pulled the mask off his face, opening his puppet maw and firing a large amount of senbon at Naruto. The blonde, Wover, fluidly dodged the needles with an unusual grace. Hinata watched in surprise as Naruto dodged and dodged, but when she activated her Byakugan, her eyes widened. Chiyo Bazama is controlling Naruto-kun's movements with chakra strings? That's right, if anyone would know exactly how to dodge Sasori's attacks, it would be his grandmother. Suddenly, Sasori raised his left hand and launched the massive gauntlet at Naruto. Hinata's eyes widened once more when she saw what was inside the gauntlet. Naruto-kun, Chiyo Bazama, look out! She yelled out, rushing forward as all the rods in the gauntlet broke and launched a massive amount of senbons in all directions. Hinata got between Naruto and Chiyo and started spinning on the spot. Kaiten, a dome of chakra formed around her, deflecting each and every senbon heading for them. Whoa! Naruto barked with an amazed smile on his face. You learned a new move, Hinata. Sasori's eyes were wide in surprise as Naruto charged past Hinata, heading straight for him. His tails raised into the air, rearing back to pierce Naruto, but the blonde flashed through seals, and Sasori's surprise increased when 2 wooden poles shot out of the ground to wrap around the tail, keeping it in place. Wah, gotcha! Naruto roared as he reached the puppeteer, who looked away from the wooden poles in time to catch a massive punch to the face, which completely smashed the puppet to bits and shattered the ground underneath it from the force. A shape came flying out of the smashed Hirako, wearing a cloak that hid his features from view. As he landed, however, one could easily tell that he was short, about the height of a 14-year-old. Of course, that's my grandmother, came a youthful, monotone voice from within the cloak. No wonder why even that boy was able to avoid my attacks. You saw all of my attacks, using chakra strings to control the boy. Not only that, you cleverly put strings on Hirako's tail, signaling the boy where to attack in order to restrain it. You've worked this out quite well, Chiyo said, smiling proudly. Well, of course, the boy said, grabbing his cloak. Who was it that taught me to play with puppets? No one else, but you. Yes. Well, we're done playing for today. Sasori pulled off his cloak, revealing a very young-looking boy garbed in Akatsuki robes, with red hair and a surprisingly gentle face. Do you really think it will be that easy, Chiyo-Bazama? The hell? Naruto muttered, narrowing his eyes. Hinata, take a look at him. Hinata looked intently at Sasori, her eyes widening in surprise. This is impossible, she exclaimed. He has a chakra center, but his chakra points are gone. He's held together by chakra strings. Sasori didn't respond to this revelation. Instead, he pulled out a scroll and held it out, letting it roll open to reveal the kanji for 3 written on it. I'll show you what I brought along. Killing him for my collection gave me a hard time indeed. That's why I like him the best. There was an explosion of smoke, and when it cleared, everyone went wide-eyed at the sight, seeing a puppet version of a person Naruto and Hinata had only seen in old bingo books. The Sandame case cage of the iron sand. The Sandame, Naruto muttered, tensing up. It's been over 10 years since the Sandame suddenly disappeared from the village. Chiyo muttered grimly. Sasori, for a retired old woman near death, you're still quite good, Sasori remarked. Even retired and near death, I'll still take action. I've too many regrets to die yet. Chiyo sighed. My grandson, you've not only fallen to the level of a mere criminal, but you've betrayed your village, and gone after the case cage 3 times. 3 times? Hinata repeated in surprise. It was Orochimaru who killed the Yondaime case cage, Gaara's father, but it was this one who guided him. And this time with Gaara. Also, even the Sandame. Hey, I don't know about the Yondaime, Sasori defended. It was my subordinate who guided him. Indeed, I was originally partnered with Orochimaru in Akatsuki, so he did many things. But I had nothing to do with the Yondaime. Now, let us begin. With that, Sasori launched the Sandame at Chiyo and Hinata. He's fast, Hinata thought in surprise as a large amount of blades extended from the case cage's right sleeve, heading straight for her. I don't have time to start the Kaden. The blades came closer and closer to Hinata, almost in slow motion. When they were an inch away from her face, however, a sandal was planted on the case cage's arm, belonging to none other than Naruto, who kicked the arm away, then spun in the air and landed a heel kick on the case cage's cheek, sending the puppet flying back. Ouch! Naruto muttered as he landed, rubbing his heel into the dirt. That kinda hurt. The Sandame case cage is a human puppet, Naruto. Chiyo called. It has all the abilities of the original. What? Naruto barked, wide-eyed. Are you telling me he can use the iron sand? He scoffed and reached down, rubbing his heel. No wonder his face is so hard. Hinata, you're uniquely suited to dismantle this puppet, Chiyo said seriously. If you can break the chakra connection between the joints, and cut the strings holding it, it will become useless. It can only use the iron sand as long as it's under Sasori's control. You're operating under the assumption that I will let you destroy it, Sasori said as a metallic sand started pouring out of the case cage's mouth, swirling around it like clouds of steel dust. Sasori made a few gestures with his hands, and the iron sand formed into hundreds of tiny projectiles, which all shot off toward Naruto, Hinata, and Chiyo. Doden. Doryuheki. Naruto called out, slamming his palms into the ground. A massive wall of earth rose up between them and Sasori, and hundreds of thumps were heard as the iron projectiles impacted with it. Behind it, Naruto's eyes widened as he flashed through seals. Shit. Again. Once more, he slammed his hands into the ground, causing another wall to rise up behind the first one, just in time for several of the projectiles to break through, slamming into the second wall. Those are some sharp attacks. Naruto muttered, shaking his head in amazement. Naruto-kun, it's still coming. Hinata yelled suddenly, making Naruto's eyes widen as he looked up, to see the sand welling over the rock wall. He made to dodge, but was shocked to find his feet stuck to the ground. Looking down, he saw that ropes of iron sand was wrapped around his ankles, anchoring him to the ground. What the hell? When did? Naruto barked, only for his eyes to widen. When I kicked it, did it attach its sand to me back then? Gritting his teeth, Naruto slammed his hands together and flashed through seals. Mokuton. A massive cloud of dust was kicked up when the heavy iron sand crashed down onto Naruto. Naruto-kun. Hinata screamed in shock. The earth walls crumbled, revealing the smirking Sasori behind them. How cute, he said softly as the pile of iron sand rolled off slightly to reveal a wooden dome covering the blonde. However, it's not enough to protect against this. The cage's hand raised, and its fist clenched. The iron sand wrapped around the wood dome and constricted, easily crushing it and anything inside, just like Gaara's Sabaku Susu, desert funeral. Sasori's brow furrowed, however. What? The ground underneath the cage burst, and out came Naruto, his fist clenched. The air around his fist seemed to be distorting from the amount of chakra packed into it. Take this. The punch that impacted with the puppet packed enough force in it to send a shockwave through the air that shook the entire cave, making pieces of stone break off from the ceiling and shaking plenty of dust from it. The cage puppet exploded into hundreds of tiny bits, Sasori's eyes widening at the sight. When did he? His gaze went toward where he had crushed the wooden dome, to see nothing but splinters in a pile. Was it a clone from the start? Hinata and Chiyo both breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing Naruto standing, appearing to be fine. Sasori noticed this, and smirked slightly. So, you didn't tell your teammates that it was a clone? Went for genuine reactions, did you? Something like that, Naruto said, getting into a fighting stance. Now, let's see you break as well. Chapter 13. Sasuke scoffed to himself. Somehow, he felt like he'd drawn the short straw. Naruto was probably having a much more interesting fight than him and Kakashi. After all, you couldn't really call this a fight, chasing after that Deidara guy. I think this is far enough, they heard Deidara say, before spinning around and launching 8 clay projectiles at Kakashi and Sasuke, who dodged to the sides just in time for the clay birds to explode. Sasuke, did you see it? Kakashi asked as the two landed next to each other on the ground, looking up at Deidara through the trees. Yeah, seems like he's a one-trick pony, too, so this should be easy. Don't get too cocky, Sasuke. He's an S-rank ninja for a reason, Kakashi muttered, staring up at Deidara with his Sharingan. Now, I hope you're not going to be reluctant to strike such a handsome opponent. Sasuke blinked at that and glanced at Kakashi. Was that a gay joke? Maybe. Besides, how would you know handsome? Never mind. Let's just focus on this fight. Hey, stop ignoring me or you'll pay for it, Kakashi and Sasuke only just then noticed the clay bird between them. Their eyes widened just as it exploded. Deidara gave a bark of laughter as he stared down at the cloud of smoke that rose from the explosion. I'm disappointed. I expected more from Itachi's little brother, Deidara's eyes widened when a blade was suddenly placed at his throat, a chikudo to be exact. He looked over his shoulder to see Sasuke standing behind him on the bird, holding the sword with his Sharingan blazing. Then I'll have to put on a good show, won't I? TCH. According to reports, you use explosive clay to attack, but I haven't seen nearly as many explosions as were reported from your attack on the cage, Sasuke said, a smirk appearing on his face. I'm guessing you don't have too much clay left. Is that so, Deidara asked, smirking as well. What do you think you're standing on, moron? Sasuke glanced down, to see that his feet had sunk into the bird. He tried to pull them out, but it was like hardened cement. When he looked up at Deidara again, his eyes widened upon seeing the former Iwa ninja also turning into clay. Katsu was heard from the trees below, and both Deidara and the bird blew up. Sasori looked emotionless, but anyone could see in his eyes that he was at least a bit irritated. Slowly, he reached up and started unbuttoning his coat. It really has been a long time, he said slowly, before taking off his coat, making Naruto, Hinata, and Chiyo's eyes widen, since I used myself. Sasori's entire body was that of a puppet. He had 4 long blades on a mechanical arm sticking out of either side of his lower back, a holder for 4 scrolls on his back, a stinger on a spool of rope in the empty and open stomach cavity, some kind of compartment in the right side of his chest, and a piece of flesh stuck in the left side of his chest, which had the kanji for scorpion painted on it. He turned himself into a puppet. Naruto muttered in amazement. I thought it was strange that he hadn't aged a day since the last time I saw him, Chiyo mumbled gravely. His chakra is flowing from that thing in his chest. Hinata said softly, focusing her Byakugan on Sasori. I think that is what is keeping him alive. Sasori raised his hands, showing 2 metal tubes sticking out of his palms. Naruto and Hinata only had a second to go wide-eyed, before they both had to dodge a stream of white-hot flames shooting out of each tube. Sweden. Sujin Heki. Naruto called out after forming a set of seals, spitting out a large amount of water, which formed a wall in front of him, blocking the stream of fire, while Hinata and Chiyo did a very good job of dodging. What's wrong? Sasori said as the fire died down, and one of the scrolls on his back disintegrated. Too hot for you? Without waiting for a response, Sasori leaned back, and the stinger shot out of his stomach, heading straight for Naruto at an amazing speed. What he didn't expect was for Naruto to lash out with his leg, kicking the stinger into the air, before lashing out and grabbing the rope. Mistake, Naruto concluded with a grin, before giving the rope a yank. Sasori was sent hurling toward Naruto, who cocked his fist back as he packed it with chakra. However, the blades on Sasori's back started spinning and moved forward, so that they were spinning protectively in front of the puppeteer. Naruto's fist clenched, the chakra packing into and casting a shockwave that cracked the ground. Time it right, Naruto yelled in his mind as the puppet came flying toward him. His fist rocketed toward the redhead, and he watched almost in slow motion as it neared Sasori, slipping right between two of the spinning blades and smashing into Sasori's chest. Sasori was smashed into pieces, the punch scattering them all over the cave with the force of it. Gotcha, Naruto said triumphantly, grinning. Well done, Naruto-kun. Hinata praised with a smile as Naruto turned around and walked over to her and Chiyo. Thanks. Sorry you didn't get to fight the Sandame. I guess I'm just a glory hog, Naruto said, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. He blinked, however, when his senses picked up on movement, and he spun around to see the pieces of Sasori moving across the ground, gathering together and slowly reforming his body. Senju Naruto. Sasori muttered as his head reattached itself to his body. I never thought I'd have to use this technique against a single shinobi. He took a scroll off his back and tossed it into the air. It unfurled, and he opened the compartment on the right side of his chest, sending out hundreds of chakra strings as a massive amount of smoke exploded from the scroll. When it cleared, the team went wide-eyed. Floating above Sasori was at least 100 different puppets, and Naruto could bet that each and every one of them had at least one poison-coated blade hidden somewhere on them. How is that? Naruto muttered, screwing his eyes shut and shaking his head. When he opened his eyes again, the puppets were still there, so he clearly wasn't imagining it. Scratch that, I'm not going to ask if it's possible, since it clearly is, but are you freaking kidding me? How am I going to explain this? Sasori muttered, burying his face in his palm and looking genuinely embarrassed. How long it took me to take down 2 brats and an old hag. That I even had to take out my last trick. He looked up, a deadened and very dangerous look in his eye. Akahiji. Hyaki no Suin, Red Secret Technique. Performance of 100 puppets. I will show you its power. Chiyo reached into a pouch on her hip and took out a scroll, unrolling it and slamming her hands together. Out of the scroll, 10 puppets were summoned into existence, and Naruto had to admit that they looked a lot more badass than Sasori's puppets. Right, Naruto said with a grin. Guess we've got more soldiers on our side now. Alright, he punched his fist into his palm. Let's do this. Dangerous, dangerous. Sasuke muttered, landing on top of a tree and patting his smoldering right sleeve. Guess that's what I get for getting a big head. Almost got you. Uchiha Sasuke, HN. Sasuke looked to his right, so see Deidara floating on another clay bird, smirking at the Uchiha. You did, Sasuke admitted. But how do you know I didn't just do that to lure out the real you? Deidara snorted at that. Are you expecting me to buy that? Even if you survived the explosion, you really expect me to believe you'd risk your life just to lure me out? Well, my life was never really in danger. The only risk was that I might get burned, Sasuke said with a smirk. The main purpose of that stunt was not only to lure out the real you, but also to take your mind off of Kakashi. This statement made Deidara blink. Wait, what? Suddenly, a lightning-covered hand burst out of Deidara's chest, making his eyes widen in surprise and pain as he looked over his shoulder, to see Kakashi standing behind him, his Sharingan spinning slowly in its socket. Wyu. Deidara hissed, raising his hand slowly and forming a half-ram seal. He was shocked, however, when Sasuke's sword came flying through the air, piercing the clay bird. Electricity was arcing along the blade. It's no use trying to blow us up, Kakashi said calmly. We have already read your techniques with our Sharingan. We're using our Raiden Jutsu to nullify your Doden Jutsu. Your bombs are duds. TTCH. G goddamn Sharingan, bastards. Deidara growled out, glaring from Kakashi to Sasuke. I'll get you. HN. That's not going to happen, Kakashi said simply. Sasuke. Right. Sasuke jumped, crossing the distance between them. As he landed on the clay bird, he stepped toward Deidara and grabbed his sword. The blade flashed, and the next second Deidara's head was flying through the air, separated from the body with a look of utter shock on his face. Immediately, the clay bird stopped flapping its wings and started falling toward the ground. Kakashi leapt off, taking Deidara's body, while Sasuke jumped off to grab Deidara's head in the air. I guess he was too dangerous to bring back alive, Kakashi reasoned as he lay the body down on the ground and pulled his hand out of it. But we'll have to bring the body back to Konoha for study, at least. Yeah, Sasuke said, landing next to Kakashi and setting down the head. Let's seal it up and go help the others. Do you really think they need it? Better safe than sorry. One of 100 puppets was smashed to bits just a couple of feet away from Hinata, who gave Naruto, the one who had smashed it, a grateful look. Thank you, Naruto-kun. I missed that one. In this crowd, that can be forgiven, Naruto said with a grin, flashing through hand seals. Mokutan. Huyu no Niwa, wood element. Embracing garden. Several thorny wooden vines burst from the ground and wrapped around 20 of the attacking puppets, crushing them to pieces. As Naruto focused on the technique, 2 more puppets came at him from the side, but before they could reach him, Hinata blurred into view and cut the chakra string holding them with her jukin. Hake Kusho, 8 trigrams vacuum palm, she called out, lashing out with a palm thrust at the 2 puppets, blowing them away with what appeared to be a gust of wind. Chiyo Ba. How are you holding up? Naruto asked the old lady, who leapt over to land next to him, her fingers moving with a surprising grace for someone her age. I'm feeling a bit stiff and tired, but I suppose that's something that comes with age, she admitted. Naruto-kun, you will need to go for Sasori. If you take him out, none of these puppets will pose any danger. From what I can tell, Naruto-kun, it is that piece of flesh in his chest that is keeping him alive, Hinata said, blocking an attack and countering with a jukin strike. Go, we can handle this. Naruto grinned and charged forward, swerving between the attacking puppets and dodging as best he could. He gritted his teeth when he felt a blade cut up his cheek, and another cutting him in the shoulder. Nonetheless, he kept up his charge, heading straight for a surprised Sasori. Just die already. Naruto barked as he held out his hand. A ball of wildly spiraling chakra formed above his palm as he sped between 2 puppets and crossed the distance to Sasori, who only had time to go wide-eyed before the blonde slammed the ball into the piece of flesh in his chest with a cry of Rasengan. He didn't cry out in pain, however. Perhaps he simply couldn't feel pain? In any case, he maintained the surprised look as his body was once more blown to pieces. This time, though, the flesh wasn't just sent flying. It was completely shredded by the attack, spattering the walls of the cave with tiny pieces of flesh. Immediately, the 50 or so remaining puppets stopped moving, dropping lifelessly to the ground. Feeling confident enough to relax a bit, Naruto let out a sigh. This fight took way too long. Naruto-kun? Hinata uttered, watching Naruto cautiously as she approached him. Slowly, he sank down on one knee, exhaling once more. This is one damn potent poison, he mumbled. Hinata. You made antidotes, right? Why yes. Please, hold still, and I'll administer it right away. Slowly, Naruto's gaze drifted toward Gaara's lifeless body, which was laying by the wall of the cave. Amazingly, it hadn't been disturbed by the battle that had taken place. It's a shame we were too late, he said softly as Hinata stuck him with an auto-injector, which pumped the antidote into his bloodstream. He was way too young for this. Chiyo made her way over, looking tired but still fit for another bout. Her gaze was sad as she looked at Gaara, her brow furrowing. I am the reason why this happened, she said softly. I was the one who performed the jutsu that sealed the Shukaku inside Gaara. If it wasn't for that, he would have led a good life. And he wouldn't have been targeted by the Akatsuki. Don't blame yourself, Naruto muttered, rising to his feet with Hinata's help. There's nothing you can do now. There is one thing I can do, Chiyo said slowly. An old hag's way of making up for her mistakes in life, I suppose. What do you mean? Naruto asked curiously. I have a jutsu that I had been saving for Sasori, should he ever need it, Chio said. It's a Tensai ninjutsu, life transfer technique. It can save Gaara. It was a week later that found Naruto sitting at Ichiraku Ramen with Sasuke. He was grinning happily to himself while waiting for his ramen to be served. Well, at least now we know we're ready for the Akatsuki, he said, flashing Sasuke a thumbs up. During our first encounter with them, we killed two, and we defeated Itachi, even if it was just a strange clone with less power. It doesn't sound as impressive when you say it like that, though. Sasuke muttered. The only difference, I think, is that if he'd been at full power, it would have just taken a bit longer. Maybe, Sasuke said, nodding slowly. Still, I can't shake the feeling that he was just playing with us. You sure that's not just because he's your brother? Like, some inborn, permanent suspicion that he's purposefully being a dick against you in particular? Sasuke blinked at that and gave Naruto a strange look. In response, the blonde shrugged. Hey, I don't know. I've never had a blood brother, remember? I don't know how those relationships work. Speaking of relationships, I've noticed that you've been getting a lot of female attention lately, Sasuke said with a smirk. I guess now that I'm off the market, they're settling for the second best, eh? This earned him a glare from Naruto. You do realize that I can break your face with a flick of a finger, right? Point taken. But while we're on that topic, has anyone caught your interest yet? Naruto wanted to know, to which Sasuke scoffed. Why would I tell you? You've probably got 10 scathing jokes all lined up. Well, they're just jokes. But if you're insistent, I'll keep them to myself. I seriously do want to know if I'll have a prospective brother-in-law soon. Well, you wouldn't really be brothers-in-law, since we're not actually related. Well, we should be. Naruto barked. We did the blood pact, we've grown up together, we're about as close as we could possibly get without sharing parents. Plus, we'll be doing that clan alliance once I become head, so there's that as well. I think I have the right to call any guy you fall for my brother-in-law. Sasuke smiled softly as Ichiraku set down their ramen bowls in front of them. I guess that's true. And it's not like I mind. And for your information, yes. Oh ho. Naruto grinned widely. So, anyone I know? If you say Guy or Lee, I'm going to have to break all of your bones. God no. No, it's not anyone you know, I think, Sasuke said, shaking his head. You know Yama-san at the weapons shop? I thought you weren't into older men? His son, you moron. He's been giving me glances. Oh, you mean Takeshi? Yeah, he's a good guy. Didn't know he leaned that way, though. I'm not totally sure if he does, Sasuke muttered. You know, it's really hard for a gay guy to find someone. For straight people, it's easier. Just look for someone who doesn't have the same reproductive organs as you in your set, but this. I don't know who is available and who isn't. Right. Naruto downed his ramen in record time, paid for the meal, and then dashed off, leaving a blinking Sasuke staring after him. He just ate one bowl? Ichiraku asked in surprise. That's rare. Wonder what got into him. Sasuke muttered, frowning. Though I'm getting this feeling like I need to beat him up for something. Sasuke sat there in puzzled silence for only a few minutes before Naruto came running back to the ramen stand, taking a seat and ordering another bowl. Within moments, the ramen was served, and Naruto wasted no time wolfing it down. Ah, that was good. Another, Naruto said, setting down the bowl with a grin. He looked at Sasuke to see the Uchiha staring expectantly at him. What was that all about? Oh yeah, I totally forgot. Naruto said and gave Sasuke a thumbs up. I went to see Takeshi. You read his signals correctly. He's interested. This made Sasuke go wide-eyed in shock. Yeah, I went and talked to him for you. To Naruto's amazement, the punch that he had been expecting never came. Instead, Sasuke's face turned steadily more red, and then a thud echoed through the ramen stand as Sasuke slammed his face down on the counter in embarrassment. What, was that not all right? A chink was heard as Sasuke's Chikudo clicked out of its sheath. Nah, Ru, too. Tsunade sat in a smaller meeting room in the Hokage Tower, a room she was sure her predecessor and sensei had spent many hours in, with the very same people who were sitting across from her right now, no doubt. So, Homura-san, Kaharuba, what did you need? Tsunade asked in a professional tone of voice, but she knew that the two would try to push their outdated way of doing things onto her. They would try to make her do what they wanted. Some things never changed, after all. Tsunade, we need to talk about Senju Naruto, Homura said seriously. Somehow, I get the feeling you are going to propose something ridiculous, Tsunade muttered. Do not send Naruto on missions that have a possibility of contact with Akatsuki, Homura said. And from now on, appoint high-ranking shinobi to watch Naruto. Assign him to 4-man teams to reinforce our supervision and guard over him. Also, you should decrease his amount of missions as much as possible, Koharu added, and restrict the range of his movements. Tsunade snorted loudly as she leaned back in her sofa. That is ridiculous, she said, waving them off. Tsunade, Naruto is no ordinary child. He's a Jinchuriki, Homura argued. Normally, we should not even allow him to leave the village, should keep him under constant supervision. We are making compromises here. Naruto is already in an incredibly capable 4-man team, Tsunade said simply. And restricting his movements is out of the question. Even if I somehow agreed to it, even I somehow did, Akatsuki would still pursue him. The Jinchuriki staying in the village didn't stop them from going after the Cage himself, after all. If we confine him to the village, Konoha itself will be in danger. If he's constantly on the move, the Akatsuki will be more hard-pressed to find him. Tsunade's eyes narrowed. Naruto has an incredible power. He is a great asset to Konoha. You are being flippant, Tsunade, Homura said. Speak like a Hokage. This caused Tsunade to stomp her foot down on the floor, actually shaking the room with the force. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm not going to lock away one of Konoha's most powerful shinobi. Then, can you truly guarantee that Naruto will not be taken by Akatsuki? Homura barked, raising his voice and giving Tsunade a stern glare. If Akatsuki takes the Kyuubi from Naruto, they will become an even greater threat to Konoha. Can you guarantee that this will not happen? Tsunade calmed down upon hearing this. To Homura and Koharu's surprise, the blonde Hokage smiled softly, a smile full of confidence. Naruto will not be taken. I have complete faith in that. And if that belief is mistaken? Koharu said. What will you do? The will of fire burns strongly in Naruto. He will never fall, that is a guarantee. Even if he would come close to it, he has Hyuga Hinata, Hitaki Kakashi, and Uchiha Sasuke by his side to support him. And should the impossible happen, should the Akatsuki kill that team and take the Kyuubi, placing Konoha and Fire Country in danger, then I will put my life on the line to save it, as Godem Hokage. A silence followed this. Clearly, Homura and Koharu didn't really know how to continue. Thankfully, they were smart enough not to use the same argument over and over. They knew that they couldn't play those cards anymore, and had to come up with a new tactic. Tsunade didn't let them start. I am the Hokage of Konoha. Not only that, but I am the head of the Senju clan. Naruto is a Konoha shinobi and member of the Senju clan. As a shinobi, what he does is up to him. As his head, the restrictions placed on his movements are decided by me. Not you. You two are advisors. You may give your opinion, and I'll take it into account, but don't order me around. This is not a democracy. Tsunade scoffed at the two old shinobi and stood up. How's that for speaking like a Hokage? You are still improving, Hyuga Hiyashi said as he took a break from his training session with Hinata. They were sitting by the training ground, drinking tea. Hinata nodded silently, and Hiyashi took this moment to give his daughter a studying glance. Is it the Senju boy? There was, as always, a tone of slight disapproval in his voice. But it wasn't disapproval toward Senju Naruto himself. He was disapproving toward anyone who wasn't a Hyuga. Hiyashi didn't discriminate, after all. Naruto-kun's return has made me happier, father, but it's not him alone, Hinata said softly, a small smile appearing on her face. Our team is back together. It pains me to admit this, but being on the same team as the Uchiha and Senju has been good for you, Hiyashi said, his eyes closing to demonstrate just how painful it was to admit that. They seem to be a great inspiration for you. Naruto-kun and Sasuke-kun are born leaders, father, Hinata said. They both inspire me to push on, even when it feels like I may have hit the peak of my potential. They have the ability to help you reach as high as you possibly can. Speak of the devil, Hiyashi said suddenly, and just then, there were two blurs in front of them, revealing themselves to be Senju Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke. Yo! Naruto greeted, raising his hand. Hinata bowed her head in greeting. but Hiashi just closed his eyes in annoyance. This made Naruto furrow his brow. What, you're not gonna ask how we got in? Does it matter? You will just find another way to come here, Hiashi muttered, which caused Naruto to frown. Wow, buzzkill. Hiashi's eyes snapped open to glare at Naruto, who flinched slightly at the intensity. Whoa, easy. I meant no offense. If you want to be a buzzkill, good for you. Goes with the Hyuga head image. Go buzzkilling. You're not making this situation any better, Sasuke quipped, noticing how Hiashi's frown got even harsher. Anyway, we need to borrow Hinata for a while. Why? Hiashi asked, not letting up his glare. Team training, Naruto said simply, walking up to them and placing a hand on Hinata's shoulder. Later. With that, Team 7, including Hinata, blurred away before Hiashi could argue. The three Chunin appeared in the clearing of their usual training ground. The massive forest Naruto had summoned had long since sunk back into the ground thanks to the blonde's manipulation, so it was open once more. Hinata looked from Sasuke to Naruto, seeing the two of them looking a bit uncomfortable. What kind of training do we need to do? She asked hesitantly. She didn't know if she wanted an answer, considering how embarrassed the duo looked. Well, we need to do some more teamwork exercises, Naruto muttered. It's embarrassing to admit, since we're all Chunin, and we've known each other for so long, but the fact is, I wreak too much havoc in my fights. And I'm not exactly careful, either, Sasuke muttered. Yeah, I could barely use any of my Mokuton ninjutsu during that fight with Sasori, Naruto said. Since I'm not really careful, there was a chance I might hit you or the old lady with one of my stronger attacks. So we need to get a bit more organized. But, shouldn't Kakashi-sensei be here for that as well? We've already contacted him, but you know how tardy he is, Sasuke said, crossing his arms with a frown on his face. We'll get started on some simpler exercises until he gets here. A knock sounded on Tsunade's door, and when Tsunade called, "Enter," it opened to reveal Kakashi, who gave her a lazy wave. You wanted to see me, Hokage-sama? Yes, I want you to break the news to Naruto because I really don't want to hear his whining, Tsunade said with a nod, which made Kakashi sweat drop as she reached into a drawer on her desk and pulled out a thick file, holding it out to the Junin. Team 7 is no longer on the missions list. What's this? Kakashi asked, taking the file and opening it. That is a new group I am putting together, Tsunade said, while Kakashi looked over the roster to see who else was in the group. The Niju Shoutai, 20 platoons, is being created for the sole purpose of hunting and killing the Akatsuki whenever they cross the border into Fire Country. I want your team in the group. Naruto would be upset about taking off the missions list, but I guess the thought of hunting Akatsuki would appease him a bit, if only slightly, Kakashi said softly. You said you want my team? I am well aware of how dangerous Akatsuki is, Kakashi, Tsunade said seriously. That is why joining the group is completely voluntary. Kakashi had a small frown on his face. There were many pros and cons to consider. Granted, putting Team 7 in the Niju Shoutai would make his students pleased, because it would give them a chance to fight Akatsuki. However, being on the team would take them off the missions list, and no one could know how long it would take until an Akatsuki encounter. Naruto might even manage to drive Kakashi crazy with complaints. But then, Asuma had joined, commanding Shikamaru, Izumo, and Katetsu, and Asuma would sure never let Kakashi hear the end of it if the Cycloptic Junin declined a job that the Sarutobi accepted. Very well, Kakashi said after a few seconds of silence, nodding at Tsunade. You can count on Team 7. Excellent, Tsunade said, a pleased smile on her face. Though, I wonder, Tsunade-sama, Kakashi muttered, raising his hand to rub his chin. Why would you offer Naruto such a job? What do you mean? I'm certain you will never hear the end of this from the elders. I am just surprised you would take all that complaining for Naruto's sake, even if he is your grandson. Usually, I wouldn't bother, that's true, Tsunade said with a nod, but then smiled at Kakashi. But fact remains that Team 7 is probably the strongest shinobi team at my disposal. If anyone can take down an Akatsuki pair, it's you and your brats. Kakashi retained his normal lazy expression, but he was definitely surprised to hear that. While he was used to hearing about what an amazing Junin he was, though Naruto and Sasuke had been doing their damnedest to convince him otherwise during their spars, he had never been told by a Hokage that he was one of the strongest. Not even Minato told him that. I'm honored to hear that, Hokage-sama, he said, bowing his head. Just don't tell Naruto and Sasuke, Tsunade said as she returned to her paperwork, taking the file from Kakashi again. I don't want their heads getting any bigger than they already are. Well, welcome to the Niju Shoutai. You're dismissed. Right. Chapter 14. Life was pretty good for Naruto. Granted, Kakashi putting them in the Niju Shoutai had pissed him off a little. While it would be awesome to go fighting Akatsuki, there was still the fact that they couldn't do missions because they were on standby. So, naturally, Naruto spent most of that time either sparring with Sasuke, Hinata, or Kakashi, or overseeing Konohamaru's training. Unfortunately, that became boring quickly. But all in all, life was good. Since he came back from his training trip, he had noticed that he received considerably less angry stares from the villagers. Some of the shopkeepers even greeted him now, which was cool. And Kurama wasn't as much of a dick as he used to be. And Naruto had still managed to avoid catching the gaze from Sasuke. While he knew that homosexuality wasn't contagious, he loved how annoyed Sasuke got when Naruto claimed that it was. Well, Naruto heard, making him look over his shoulder to see Team 10 approaching, minus Choji. It was Shikamaru who had spoken, smirking at him. Heard you also got signed up for that troublesome Niju Shoutai thing. Yeah, Naruto said, nodding in greeting to Ino, who smiled at him. You too? Yeah, Asuma-sensei signed us up, Ino said. Choji and I are in 9th platoon with Raida-senpai and Aoba-senpai, and Shikamaru is in 4th with Asuma-sensei, Azumo-senpai, and Katetsu-senpai. Wow, you're not one team? Naruto asked in surprise. Why not? Don't you work best with each other? That's right, you've been away, Ino said in realization. Team 10 has been split up for a whole bunch of missions, and most often we've been paired up with others. Choji and I work better with Raida and Aoba than Azumo and Katetsu do, so we've been swapped. Cool. So, you guys looking forward to kicking some Akatsuki ass? Naruto asked with a grin, which made Shikamaru scoff, while Ino looked a bit hesitant. Get real, Shikamaru muttered as he reached up and scratched the back of his head. Personally, I'm hoping you and your dream team end up saddled with that responsibility. I don't really like getting my ass kicked, even if I do a bit of kicking on my own. Yeah, I don't feel entirely comfortable at the thought of fighting guys like that. Ino muttered in embarrassment. I'm just not as strong as you and your teammates. Yeah, Ino's greatest weapon is her harpy scream, but I don't figure it'd do too much against the Akatsuki. Ouch. Shikamaru yelped in pain as he was smashed into the ground by Ino's fist of righteous fury. Shut up, Shikamaru. Geez, that's what I get for agreeing with my teammate. Shikamaru muttered, sitting up and rubbing his head. So, anyway, Naruto, what are you up to? Trying to get rid of my restlessness, Naruto answered with a frown. Because of this Niju Shoutai thing, we're on standby, so we can't go on missions. Hell, I can't even leave the village. And sparring with the team isn't as fun and refreshing as it used to be. Maybe you need to spar with some new blood, Shikamaru mused, which made Naruto grin at him. Are you volunteering, Shikamaru? I'm not stupid, Shikamaru muttered. I'd get killed within 5 minutes. I think you're underestimating your tactical skills, Naruto said, before looking over Shikamaru with a pondering look on his face. But you do look kinda fragile. I guess it's for the best. So, you've got nothing to do, then? Ino asked suddenly, smiling brightly. Nothing planned? No? Good. Would you like to go get a bite to eat with me? Naruto opened his mouth to say no on pure reflex, to claim that he had training to do. Thankfully, his mouth wasn't faster than his brain this time, because he realized that he didn't actually have any training to do. What? He asked, blinking in confusion. Would you like some dango? Ino asked, sliding up to Naruto and looping her arm with his. My treat. Okay? Naruto said hesitantly. Ino had never really shown any real interest in him before. She had always been a Sasuke follower. Was she going for Naruto because he was the second best? If that was it, he didn't really want to hang out with her. But then again, free food. Alright, great, Ino said with a pleased smile as she dragged Naruto off. Shikamaru, let Asuma know I won't be there for team training. Shikamaru watched as Naruto was pulled away by Ino. He reached up and lazily scratched his head. Now why'd she have to decide on Naruto? One loud blonde is troublesome enough, he muttered before frowning. If those two get together, they'll be around each other a lot. And by extension, they'll both be around me a lot. And they'll be loud. And then, Sandayu started talking about how it was hopeless. Naruto told Hinata as the two wandered through Konoha, having just had lunch at Toyama Dango. So Koyuki stands up, and she gives him this look, just like Funheim in the movies, and she goes. Naruto set his face in as serious an expression as he could and looked at Hinata out of the corner of his eye. Never give up. As long as we breathe, we can fight. Man, I thought I was gonna cry for sure. Hinata giggled at that, smiling brightly. You sure have been through many adventures on your trip, haven't you, Naruto-kun? Yeah, it just sucked that you guys weren't with me. It would have been much more fun, Naruto said with a grin, which only grew wider as the third member of their team landed in front of them, raising his hand in a wave. Yo, Sasuke, how did the date go? Yo, Naruto, Hinata, Sasuke greeted, before nodding. It went surprisingly well. It felt a bit nervous in the beginning, but Takeshi is a pretty nice guy. See, aren't you happy I went and flapped my gums to him? Naruto asked happily. If I hadn't, you'd still be stalking him to try to figure out if he was a fellow gay. Yes, I'm grateful you went and asked him, Sasuke said, but added before Naruto could speak, but that does not mean that you're permitted to do anything like that again. He just doesn't want to admit that the direct approach is usually the best, Naruto muttered to Hinata, who much to Sasuke's surprise nodded in agreement. At 2, Hinata? Well, Sasuke-kun, you are usually so brave. But when it came to Takeshi-san, you were kind of, me-like. I was not, were too, was not, were too, Hinata insisted. And I would know. Wait, you were Hinata-like? Naruto asked, his eyes widening. When? Why was I not around for it? Hinata, don't you dare. He's been coming to the Hyuga compound sometimes for advice, Hinata said, a smile on her face. It clearly showed how at ease she felt around her teammates that she could say something like that without fearing Sasuke's wrath. Eep. Okay. By the fact that Hinata just realized what she had said and took off running, shedded fear Sasuke's wrath. Why do you have to go and scare her off? Naruto muttered, scratching his head. She was gonna buy me ramen. Haven't you already eaten? Sasuke asked, to which Naruto nodded. Yeah, but I always have room for ramen. You know, maybe you should sew up that black hole you call a stomach? Sasuke said with a smirk. Don't want to get fat. I'll never get fat, Naruto said, snorting. The doctors say I've got a high metabolism, he muttered, using air quotes as he mockingly said, high metabolism. Sasuke snorted as well at hearing that. He was quiet for a few seconds, and then gave Naruto another smirk. So, I hear you went on a date as well recently. Ino, was it? Yeah, it was pretty strange, Naruto mumbled as he reached up to scratch the back of his head. Didn't really know what to make of her. Thankfully, I'll have a chance to figure her out later. We've decided to go out for Dango again soon. Before Sasuke could comment on that, Hinata came running into view. She looked alarmed by something, and it sure as hell wasn't Sasuke. Sasuke-kun, Naruto-kun, she exclaimed as she reached them. The Niju Shoutai have been summoned to the Hokage Tower. There's been an Akatsuki sighting. Freakin' finally. Naruto barked, a grin appearing on his face. I've been getting antsy just walking around the village. Let's go. And that's the end of the briefing, Tsunade said, standing on the roof of the Hokage Tower in front of the 80 gathered ninjas, 24-man teams, the Niju Shoutai. On her right stood Shizune, and on her left stood a monk from the Fire Temple, which had been attacked by the Akatsuki. Does anyone have any questions? Naruto raised his hand, and Tsunade looked at him. Capture or kill? He asked. Capture if possible, but no matter what, do not let them escape. Anyone else? Now Asuma raised his hand. Ichiraku, a former member of the 12 Shinobi Guardsmen, should have been there too. What happened to him? The monk frowned at that and lowered his head. Ichiraku-sama died, at the hands of those two scoundrels. As I just said, in the event that capture becomes impossible, eradicate them, Tsunade said. As much as I'd like to find out about their plans, these guys are dangerous. You must not let them leave the country. No matter what, find them. Go. Tsunade threw her arm out, and the 20 teams dashed off. When Team 7, named 5th Platoon in the Niju Shoutai, took a break, it was several miles away from Konoha. As expected, everyone turned to Naruto once they stopped. Naruto, Kakashi said, how far can you stretch your senses? Do you think you can find them from here? Only one way to find out, isn't there? Naruto said as he crouched down and put his hand in a half-ram seal, before reaching down and pressing his index finger on his other hand into the dirt. His eyes drifted shut as he concentrated harder than ever before. This would be much easier if the whole Niju Shoutai hadn't been sent out, he muttered after a moment. There are many chakra signatures I don't really recognize, but I think I can figure out which ones belong to Konoha. Any signatures that stand out? Sasuke asked, to which Naruto shook his head. Not that I can feel from here. My senses aren't sharp enough yet to stretch across a whole country. Hold on. Naruto pulled his finger out of the dirt and started going through hand seals. As usual, finishing in a snake seal, he slammed his hand down on the ground. Mokuton. Futsu no Uranaibo no Jutsu, wood element. Buddha's divining rod technique. A tremor went through the ground. Although no member of Team 7 could see it, wooden poles with intricate seal carvings on them sprouted from the ground all around them in a 50-mile radius. What's that? Sasuke asked, furrowing his brow as he looked around to try to figure out what Naruto's jutsu had just done. This is a technique the Shodai created. The Nidame was a sensor, and this technique was created to amplify a Senju chakra signal, Naruto said, putting his hand in a half-ram seal again and pressing his finger down in the dirt. They catch my chakra and send it out further, increasing my sensing range. Now shut your hole and let me focus. There was a minute of silence, and then a small grin slowly spread on Naruto's face. Ah, there you are. Found them? Kakashi asked, and Naruto nodded. Yeah, 225 clicks northwest. Either they're Akatsuki, or there's two other people with freakish chakra running around in Fire Country. Let's hope not. We've got enough to worry about as it is, Sasuke muttered, looking to the northwest. Well, there's only one way to find out if it's them. With that, the team dashed off. Sensei, Hinata spoke up as they ran. Did the monk give us any intel on the two Akatsuki? Unfortunately, no. He only survived because he wasn't there. He only arrived as they were leaving, Kakashi said, shaking his head. The only intel he could give us was a description of their appearances. Well, appearance-wise, they won't be hard to spot, what with the cloaks and all, Naruto reasoned with a shrug. Team 7 landed on a branch in a tree by the edge of the forest. Before them was a building, which was old and worn down. They had no idea what the front business had been at one point, but it looked abandoned now. However, they all knew that this was a rather well-known exchange point. No doubt, the Akatsuki had come here to turn in Chiriku's body for a bounty. Outside the building sat one of the Akatsuki members, a purple-eyed man with slicked back, gray hair, who had a large, three-bladed scythe on his back. That is one strange weapon, Naruto commented as Hinata looked the man over with her Byakugan. It's attached to a rope that's wrapped around his wrist. No doubt, he is proficient in using the scythe for mid-range attacks as well, she informed them, narrowing her eyes slightly. It's strange. Well, naturally, the thing's got 3 blades. No, that isn't what I meant, Hinata said softly. He is completely relaxed. Akatsuki are wanted. Anyone would be at least slightly on guard, but he isn't. It's as though he's not worried about any surprise attacks. So, he's either strong or stupid enough to not worry, Sasuke concluded with a hum. Well, at least we know he is mainly close range. Anyone swinging around a weapon like that is someone who enjoys carnage. I doubt he'd use any jutsu. He doesn't feel like the type. His partner is still an unknown, though, Kakashi muttered. Hinata, can you see inside the building? Hinata focused, then nodded. Yes, I see him. Her eyes widened in shock. What? What's wrong? Naruto asked. This man, he has 5 chakra centers. Hinata whispered in amazement. I have never seen anything like this before. Shit, Naruto muttered in annoyance. I hate running into the unknown. Odds are I'm gonna get hurt. That's not all. This man is also relaxed. Recklessly so. Hinata mumbled. See, can we really take these guys? So long as we take them one at a time, there shouldn't be a problem, Sasuke said, then furrowed his brow and added, hopefully. That's great. Your confidence is truly inspiring, Sasuke. Naruto muttered. Enough, Kakashi ordered, narrowing his eye as he stared at the man sitting outside the building. Naruto, we don't know anything about these guys. It would be best to just take this one out in a single strike, then focus on capturing the other. Do you feel up for a fastball? I knew you were gonna ask that. Naruto muttered as he stood up. I never should have invented that move. Well, you did, and now you're gonna fly, Sasuke said with a smirk, standing up as well and grabbing Naruto by the back of his pants and his collar. Ready? So long as you guys surround me and get ready to swarm the other guy when he comes out. Yeah, Naruto said with a nod, steeling himself. Alright, do it. Sasuke lifted Naruto into the air, holding the blonde horizontally in front of him. Kakashi and Hinata backed away to give him some room, and Sasuke started spinning. He picked up more and more speed, until he and Naruto were nothing but a blur, spinning like a top on the branch. Then, Naruto was flung straight at the man, a blonde missile that shot at the Akatsuki with amazing speed. The silver-haired man only had time to look up before he copped a straight right to his face that snapped his head back and sent him flying into and through the entire building, kicking up a massive amount of dust. One down, Naruto concluded as he landed on the steps where the man had been sitting. Now we just have to wait for the other guy. By the other guy, I assume you're referring to me? Naruto's eyes widened, and he spun around to find himself facing down an incredibly unnerving ninja. The man wore the standard Akatsuki cloak. On his head, he wore a sort of gray cowl with a black mask attached to it, which covered the lower half of his face, leaving only a small amount of his tanned face visible, along with a pair of poisonous green eyes with dark pink, almost red sclera. The eyes staring coldly at Naruto spoke of cruelty, sadism, and, most importantly, vast amounts of experience, reminding Naruto of the Sandame's eyes during the Chunin exam invasion. I've warned Hidan on countless occasions that he should focus his senses if he desperately feels a need to relax his guard. That should teach him a lesson, the man spoke in a slow, drawling, and rather gravelly tone of voice. Sorry to tell ya, Naruto said with a grin as Sasuke, Kakashi, and Hinata blurred into view around the Akatsuki member, but he won't be learning any more lessons. Is that so? Naruto only had time for his eyes to widen when he heard the whistle of steel cutting through air. He ducked, and a three-bladed scythe passed through the space his neck had previously occupied, flying straight past the surrounded Akatsuki member and toward Kakashi, who went wide-eyed and leapt out of the way. The rope attached to the butt of the scythe was given a yank, and the scythe changed direction in the air, jerking back and heading straight for Hinata, who leapt away as well. Sasuke, however, suddenly found himself an inch away from the other Akatsuki member, who had crossed the distance between them in the blink of an eye. His Sharingan eyes widened and he raised his arm just in time to catch a swing from the man. The next second, he found himself soaring through the air. What the hell? He barked in his mind, flipping and landing on his feet several yards away from the man, who was staring at him in what appeared to be boredom. Regroup. Sasuke leapt backward, putting some distance between them, and was soon joined by the rest of his team, who were all staring at the Akatsuki in shock. Or, more specifically, the Akatsuki member who came up to stand next to his partner. It was the silver-haired one, Hidan, and he looked completely unharmed. That's quite a punch you've got there, Blondie, Hidan said with a grin, tilting his head to the side, hearing several satisfying cracks, before reaching up and wiping blood from his upper lip, which had been pouring from his broken nose. Thought I actually died there for a second. Idiot, the other Akatsuki growled at his partner. I've told you not to relax, moron. Hidan twitched in annoyance, and his head snapped toward his partner. Kakuzu, eat a dick. Not even you would have had time to react to that one. Perhaps not. The speed was impressive. When he reached the edge of my senses, he was 70 feet away from you, and before I even blinked you were suddenly sent flying, Kakuzu commented, looking over the Konoha team. Lots of potential among them. And what's this? Hitaki Kakashi, the copy ninja. Your bounty is pretty high. What is this, Naruto? Kakashi asked quietly. I thought you hit him? I did, Naruto muttered, his brow furrowed in confusion. Clean, direct hit straight to the nose. He should be dead. Kakuzu, let's take two each, Hidan said, grinning at the Konoha ninjas, looking them over and sizing them up. I'll take the girl and that blonde shit who punched me. They'll be my ceremonial offerings. You really are a moron, Hidan, Kakuzu growled. Take a good look, that's the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. We want him alive. Huh? Hidan barked in surprise, narrowing his eyes as he stared intently at Naruto. Fuck, you're right. Alright, then I'll take Sword Boy instead. Should prove amusing. Very well, Kakuzu said, setting down the briefcase in his hand. But don't let your guard down, or they'll kill you. TCH. Why are you telling me that? Hidan asked with a grin reappearing on his face. If they actually can kill me, I want them to. After all, it's impossible. Kakuzu sighed. Fine, do as you wish. It's not like your death will be a great loss. If you do die, I can just cash in on your bounty. While this, which to the Konoha ninjas looked like a friendly conversation, as they couldn't hear what was being said, was going on, Team 7 were strategizing, all of them with less than pleased looks on their faces. See, this is why I hate rushing into the unknown like that. Naruto muttered. So, apparently Scythe Boy has his eyes set on you and Hinata, Sasuke. You think it's a good idea to split? Yeah, Hinata and I can separate them from each other. In any event, Kakashi is more in tune with working with your more destructive just you. You'd work best together. Be careful, though, Naruto said, raising his fist to Sasuke, who tapped it with his own fist. We still don't know what that freak can do, other than shrugging off one of my punches. Hidan, Kakuzu spoke up loud enough for Team 7 to hear. Take your fight elsewhere. If you're going to do your tedious ceremonial crap, do it away from me. TCH, you fucking atheist piece of shit, Hidan muttered, hefting his scythe. Like I want you to step all over my ritual grounds. Well, come on then, kids, let's go play elsewhere. With that, Hidan leapt off, Sasuke and Hinata following closely, leaving Naruto and Kakashi to face down Kakuzu, who gave both of them cold, calculating looks. Copy Ninja Hitaki Kakashi, 70 million Ryu, and another 30 for an intact Sharingan, he spoke up coldly, then turned his gaze to Naruto. Shizen no Kami, Senju Naruto, 30 million Ryu. It looks like I stumbled upon two big bounties today. Naruto, harden your body and go in close, Kakashi muttered quietly to Naruto. We need to figure out what this guy can do before we can think up a proper plan for how to beat him. Yeah, Naruto said with a nod, flashing through 3 hand seals that ended in a ram seal. Then, he charged forward at Kakuzu, who didn't even seem to tense up. The punch Naruto threw was a powerful one. It was fast, too, so it came as an amazing surprise when Kakuzu dodged. It was even more surprising when Kakuzu's fist came flying up into Naruto's gut, hitting him with enough force to lift him off the ground and knock the air out of him. While Naruto was in the air, Kakuzu raised his other hand and hit Naruto with an amazingly strong punch that sent him flying straight into the abandoned building, crashing through the wall and causing a decent part of the ceiling to collapse on top of him. Naruto! Kakashi yelled in surprise. He couldn't focus on Naruto, however, as Kakuzu was on him in a heartbeat, engaging him in a taijutsu fight. There was no finesse, no style in Kakuzu's moves. It was all power, and no energy was wasted in any single one of his strikes, all of them striking with almost mechanical precision. Kakashi was slightly faster, however, and with his uncovered Sharingan eye, he managed to predict the shinobi's movements and dodge by a hair's breadth each time. The fighting had to stop, however, and both fighters leapt back to avoid a massive slab of concrete that came flying past them from the hole in the wall. The dust in the hole cleared to reveal Naruto standing, blood pouring down his face from an unseen wound somewhere behind his happori, or in his hair. Ow, he said simply as he walked out of the hole. Quite the power in you, man. Guess taijutsu isn't the best way to deal with this. Kakuzu's eyes widened when Naruto flashed through a chain of hand seals. Futon. Atsudangan. A large ball of air was spewed from Naruto's mouth, tearing up the ground and heading straight for the surprised Kakuzu, who leapt out of the way at the last second. What he hadn't expected was for Kakashi to launch a fireball at him at the same time. The fireball impacted with the Atsudangan just as it passed between them, absorbing the Futon Jutsu and increasing its power as it crashed into Kakuzu, pushing him back a good 20 yards before exploding. Can't have been that easy, Naruto commented as he jumped over and landed next to Kakashi. Nope, still feel him in there, he said with a gesture for the smoke rising from the blast zone. When the smoke cleared, it revealed Kakuzu standing in the crater, looking unharmed. In fact, only his Akatsuki coat had been burned by the explosion and was now hanging from him in tatters. Kakuzu pulled the ruined coat off him, showing that he was wearing some kind of shirt that only covered his front, and not his arms, shoulders, or back. Both Naruto and Kakashi went wide-eyed at seeing that the man had stitches all over his body, and the glare he gave them was not pleasant. He also had 4 strange masks sewn into his skin on his back. How pitiful to allow myself to be hit by an attack from a pair of runts. Kakuzu glared, hunching forward slightly. Well, given who you are, I guess I can forgive myself. But right now, fun's over. Kakuzu charged forward, and Naruto noticed how his hand turned pitch black as the fist came flying. He hardened his arm and raised his hand, blocking the strike and skidding back from the force. When Kakashi made to move, Kakuzu threw his free hand out to the side. To everyone's surprise, the stitches on his forearm loosened, and his hand launched toward Kakashi as though fired from a cannon, attached to the rest of the body by a group of black tendrils. The hand latched onto Kakashi's collar, and Kakuzu gave it a yank that caused Kakashi to come flying toward Naruto, who stomped his foot down on the ground. A wooden pole, its end shaped like a hand, burst from the ground and grabbed Kakashi by the back of the collar at the same time as what appeared to be 2 wooden meat cleavers came up from under the tendrils, slamming together and cutting them off. Kakashi, not even slowed down, planted his feet against the pole and flashed through seals as he launched himself at Kakuzu, who made to leap away, only to find himself grabbed by a grinning Naruto. End of the road, Naruto exclaimed as Kakashi reached them with a lightning-covered hand, which punched straight through Kakuzu's side, piercing his head. Kakuzu's eyes screwed shut, and a grunt escaped him. He glared with a considerable amount of hatred at Kakashi with eyes that slowly dimmed and closed as his body slackened. Well, at least we can bring that other one back alive, Kakashi reasoned as he pulled his hand out of Kakuzu, and Naruto let the Akatsuki drop to the ground. Let's go help Sasuke and Hinata. Yeah, Naruto was interrupted when a fist impacted with his chin, launching him straight up into the air, and a foot impacted with Kakashi's chest and sent him flying into the building, through the wall. Once Kakashi had pushed the rubble off him and his eyes widened at what he saw. Kakuzu was standing up, glaring heatedly at Kakashi. That's impossible, Kakashi thought in shock. I'm sure I pierced his heart. A few feet away, Naruto crashed into the ground with considerable force, forming a crater with the impact. Once the dust cleared, Naruto pushed himself up and shook his head to clear it. Alright, the blonde muttered, rising to his feet to glare at Kakuzu. Round 2. Kakuzu didn't speak. Instead, he just put his hands in a ram seal. He hunched forward and growled from the strain as his back started bulging. The stitches holding the masks to his skin strained as what seemed like thousands of snakes writhed underneath the skin. Then, the stitches broke, and a huge mass of black tendrils shot out of his back, along with the 4 masks. The mass split into 4 pieces, each with a mask on them, and the slowly started taking on a somewhat humanoid form as Kakuzu's back stitched itself back together. As soon as the 4 creatures had taken their places at Kakuzu's sides, 2 of them gave echoing groans as the slowly sank to the ground and turned into black liquid, leaving only a puddle and a mask in their place. What the hell? Naruto muttered in shock, staring wide-eyed at the creatures. And with this, you die, Kakuzu growled out, narrowing his eyes. When Sasuke and Hinata had pursued Hidan, the man hadn't gone too far away from Kakuzu, probably to be able to call on his partner if he needed help. But then again, they hadn't really seemed like friends. Hidan landed in a clearing in the forest not too far away from the building where they had left Kakuzu, Naruto, and Kakashi. He rested his scythe against his shoulder and looked around, seeing Sasuke and Hinata landing in the clearing as well. Yeah, this looks like a good place, Hidan said, grinning at the 2 shinobi. As a Konoha shinobi with a capture priority, I feel the need to give you a chance, Sasuke said as he unsheathed his sword. Give up peacefully, and no harm shall befall you. You think 2 little brats like you could take me down? Hidan barked, his grin only widening as he gave his scythe a few test swings, before charging straight at Sasuke. Get real. Sasuke's Sharingan studied the man as he charged, and his eyes widened in surprise. There are so many openings. Is he really an S-ranked ninja? What's his game? Hidan whooped with glee as he swung at Sasuke, who deflected the blow with his sword, his eyes widening in amazement when Hidan jumped and launched a spin kick at Hinata, who had come charging from the side. Hinata blocked the strike, but was sent stumbling back, giving Hidan the opportunity to once more attack Sasuke, who frowned in annoyance as he blocked attack after attack. This guy is unnerving, Sasuke thought, jumping over a horizontal swipe and slashing at Hidan, cutting through the man's nose. The Akatsuki didn't even flinch from the pain. He just kept attacking. There are countless openings in his style. Rather, he has no style at all. He doesn't even flinch when I hit him. And he shrugged off one of Naruto's punches with ease. Does he just heal fast? No, his nose hasn't healed yet. Then what? Why isn't he afraid of getting hurt? Sasuke's thoughts were interrupted when he had to raise his sword to block an overhead swing. Gritting his teeth in annoyance when the two blades he had slipped his sword between tore open the shoulder of his Chunin vest, almost piercing the skin. Hidan had that grin on his face still. He still whooped with almost every attack, as if this was just some big game to him. A true blue Akatsuki. Crazy skills and an equally crazy personality. Sasuke was given a temporary reprieve when Hinata once more swooped in from the side and landed a powerful Juken strike to Hidan's ribs, hitting him hard enough to send him flying away. She didn't let up, though, charging at Hidan and engaging him in close quarters. She was striking to incapacitate, but Hidan showed a surprising ease as he dodged each attack and counter, forcing Hinata to twist and bend to avoid the menacing-looking side. That weapon is strange, Sasuke thought as he came rushing at Hidan from behind. It's totally unwieldy. It's like he had it made simply for the purpose of causing as much carnage as possible. The ground shook, and Sasuke looked to where they had come from, to see a large amount of trees rising up above the forest, followed by a series of explosions. Can't count on Naruto to come back us up right now. He's got his hands full. Come on, girl, Hidan barked as Hinata barely dodged a swing. You're not getting tired already, are you? Hidan blinked when a blade pierced through his chest, and he looked behind him to see Sasuke there, having quickly closed the distance and stabbed him. That hurt, ya dick. Hidan barked, making Sasuke's eyes widen. What? I pierced his heart. I know I did, he thought in shock, amazed at the bored, if slightly annoyed, look he was receiving from Hidan. Hinata, take him down. Hinata nodded and rushed forward, but Hidan's elbow flew up and impacted with Sasuke's temple, making him stumble back, pulling his sword out as he did. Then, Hidan charged at Hinata and swung his scythe. It all happened too quickly for the now wide-eyed Hinata to properly react. Gotcha, Hinata. The scythe flashed, and blood spattered the ground. Hinata's eyes were wide as she stared at Sasuke, who had tackled her to the ground, taking the hit for her. The scythe had sliced his back, but not deep enough to sever his spine. Still, it hurt something fierce. Finally, Hidan barked with a grin as Sasuke flipped to his feet and started flashing through hand seals. Need to put some distance between him and us so Hinata can heal me, he thought as he finished the chain in Tiger. Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu. Sasuke blew a massive fireball at Hidan, who simply grinned and licked the blood off his side, not making a single move to dodge as the fireball impacted with him, exploding in a cloud of smoke and fire. Why you got him? Hinata said, sighing in elation, only for her eyes to widen as Sasuke grunted in pain. Sasuke-kun? What the hell is this? Sasuke spoke through gritted teeth as he looked down at his right hand. The back of it sported burn wounds that hadn't been there before, and his entire arm, his right leg, his right shoulder, the right side of his neck, and his right cheek were stinging from burns as well. A chuckle sounded, drawing both ninjas' attention to the smoke, which slowly cleared. There, standing in a circle drawn with blood, with a triangle drawn inside it, was Hidan. His skin was black with white skeleton patterns covering it. Also, his body was burned in the exact place as Sasuke. How is it? Hidan asked in a voice that was downright trembling with pleasure. Does it hurt? You've been cursed now, you know. Hidan's head snapped up to stare at Sasuke with bloodshot eyes, a massive grin on his face. Let's savor the utmost pain together. How? Hinata whispered in surprise. How did Sasuke-kun get burned? Hidan gave a cackle as he reached into his ruined coat to take out a black rod. A spike tip extended from one end, and he grinned widely once more. The preparations are now set. Be prepared, because you'll be in so much pain. TCH, you talk too much. Sasuke grunted out as he twirled his sword, then charged at Hidan, who scoffed as he raised the spike, then stabbed it into his own leg. Sasuke only had time to go wide-eyed, before he tripped and fell to the ground, clutching at his leg. He felt his pant leg getting wet with blood. What? Hurts, doesn't it? Hidan barked happily, pulling the spike out of his leg. Not as much as your vitals, I bet. Hee hee. That's where you'll find the utmost pain, you know. The pain present when someone dies permeates through my body. It goes beyond pain, beyond words. Seems our bodies are connected somehow. Sasuke thought, clutching at his leg as he pushed himself into a standing position. Any damage done to him will also be done to me. How the hell am I going to deal with that? Hidan laughed again, raising his spike into the air. What other pains do you wish to savor, Or, do you want me to end it now? Sasuke and Hinata's eyes widened as Hidan took aim with his spike, and then brought it down toward his chest. Before it could so much as pierce the skin, however, an explosion in the distance caused the Akatsuki member to pause for a millisecond to glance toward its source. That millisecond's pause saved Sasuke's life, because a blur came shooting at them from Naruto's location, crashing into Hidan and sending him tumbling along the ground with it. Sasuke grunted in pain and clutched at his chest. It felt like something had just barely pierced it, poking his ribs, but no more than that. He looked toward Hidan to see him in a tangled mess on the ground, with Kakuzu on top of him, along with two strange, black creatures with porcelain masks on them. Amazingly, the spike was pierced straight through Hidan's chest. Damn it, Kakuzu, what the fuck is wrong with you? Hidan barked as the two creatures jumped off, allowing Kakuzu to get up as well. I was just about to kill that little shit. Shut your trap, Hidan. Kakuzu growled as he turned his gaze towards Sasuke and Hinata, just as Naruto and Kakashi landed in the clearing. They were both kind of dirty, and their clothes were ripped here and there, but other than that, they seemed to be fine. Seems there will be no separating them, Kakashi commented, and Sasuke gave a sigh of relief. Thanks for the save, he said, still clutching at his leg. I was about to bite it. How the hell did that happen? Naruto asked in surprise. You're strong enough to take this guy out, aren't you? He did some kind of ritual. Our bodies are connected. Any wood he gets, I get, Sasuke informed them, making their eyes widen. However, it seems to only work within that circle, he added as he pointed at the symbol painted in blood on the ground. That thing only barely pierced his chest while he was still in it, but once he was out, I wasn't hurt further. Well then, Naruto said simply, flashing through hand seals. The ground shook once more, and wooden poles rose from the ground to form a dome over the symbol, hiding it from view. There, that should stop him hurting you. Hinata, can you heal Sasuke? Why yes, right away. Good, Kakashi said with a nod. We'll try to keep them occupied until Sasuke is healed. Let's go, Naruto. Right, Naruto gritted his teeth in annoyance. In some ways, he was upset that he wasn't fighting alone. With his team there, he couldn't go crazy like he used to do during his training trip, because there was a chance that his teammates would get caught in his more destructive jutsu. He didn't yet possess the finesse of the Shodai Hokage. He was brought out of his musings when one of those strange creatures appeared in front of him, the mouth of the mask opening. A flame sparked in the mouth, and Naruto was quick to flash through seals and erect a wall of water in front of him just as the massive blast of fire came roaring at him. As the water turned into steam when the attack impacted with his wall, Naruto growled to himself. So, Sasuke's life is in constant danger as long as that Hidan chump is still in the game, so he'll have to incapacitate him first. But that's pretty freaking difficult when this Kakuzu freak and his tentacle buddies keep blocking my path. I don't know how long Kakashi-sensei can last against Hidan. All it would take is a scratch, after all. Naruto's thoughts were once more interrupted, this time by Kakuzu himself, who engaged him in a taijutsu battle once more. For such a stiff-looking guy, Kakuzu sure had speed, managing to dodge all of Naruto's counter-attacks. The man had obviously learned not to try to block Naruto's strikes, which sucked. Even a blocked attack would do considerable damage. Kakuzu landed a kick into Naruto's chest, sending him stumbling back. When Kakuzu didn't press the attack, Naruto knew something was coming. As expected, the two creatures appeared on his right, both of them opening their mouths. Naruto knew their elemental abilities, so he knew that a mixed wind and fire technique was something to watch out for. Therefore, he backflipped out of the way as the wind-enhanced ball of fire came shooting at him. Naruto's eyes widened, however, when he saw the fireball smash into the wooden dome covering the ritual circle, smashing it to bits. Shit, he thought in alarm as he saw a grin spread on Hidan's face. Hidan broke off his attack on Kakashi and dashed off toward the symbol. When he reached it, stepping onto it, he gave a triumphant laugh as he raised the spike in his hand into the air. The man was never allowed to stab himself, however, as Naruto came flying at him, tackling him off the circle into the ground. Before Hidan could even process what had happened, Naruto flipped them over on the ground so he was under Hidan, wrapping his legs around the man's waist and his arm around his neck in a guillotine choke hold. What the hell? Hidan barked, flailing his limbs. The force of Naruto's tackle had made him drop his weapons in surprise, so all he could do was wave his hands at Naruto, who tightened his hold. Let go of me, you brat. What do you think you're? A loud crack reverberated through the clearing as Hidan's body went limp. Naruto didn't let up, though. He kept up pressure, and 2 more cracks were heard, followed by a snap. Hidan's neck had been snapped clean off. That hurt, you little shit, came Hidan's voice, which made Naruto's eyes widen. Now I can't use my fucking body. Are you happy now? Of course I am, Naruto muttered, pushing the crazy immortal off him and getting to his feet, to see that Kakuzu was standing completely still, flanked by his creatures. He was just watching them right now. That was lucky, too, because Kakashi was panting slightly, and Sasuke hadn't been fully healed yet. Oi, Kakuzu, Hidan barked, laying unmoving on the ground. Come help me out here. You're annoying, Hidan. Shut up, Kakuzu growled out, his eyes fixed on Naruto. You know, fighting you fills me with nostalgia, boy. You remind me of the first Konoha ninja I ever fought. His eyes narrowed. The Shodai Hokage. Team 7 went wide-eyed at hearing that. How old is this guy? How can that be? Kakashi asked, narrowing his eyes as well. Are you immortal? There is no such thing as immortality. Oi, Hidan barked, only to be ignored. I have merely come up with a way to prolong my life. Then we shouldn't take you lightly, Kakashi said, glancing at his blonde student. Naruto, go wild. But you might get caught in it, sensei. We'll be fine. Just go crazy. A grin slowly spread on Naruto's face, and he clapped his hands together as Kakashi leapt away. Sasuke and Hinata did the same, and Kakashi made sure to pick up Hidan's unmoving body before leaving the immediate area. Is that wise, boy, having your teammates leave? Kakuzu asked, which only made Naruto grin wider as he started going through hand seals. Yeah, because this means I can go all out without worries. What? Naruto Hijutsu. Mokuton. Shizen no Fukatsu, Naruto's secret technique. Wood element. Nature's rebirth. Naruto called as he slammed his hands down into the dirt. The ground started shaking something fierce, which made Kakuzu look around with a small amount of worry in his eyes. Understandable. After all, he had fought the Shodai, so he somewhat knew what to expect. It was also guaranteed to be bigger than the forest Naruto summoned earlier. Massive trees burst out of the ground, trees the size of redwoods, which made Kakuzu and his creatures leap away to avoid being launched into the air by them. The trees stretched higher and higher into the air, reaching the same height as the peak of the Hokage monument. The forest Naruto had summoned stretched out in a radius of 5 miles in every direction. Naruto looked up to see Kakuzu landing on one of the branches sticking out of one of the trees, and the Akatsuki member shook his head. It will take more than a couple of trees to... Kakuzu cut himself off and leapt out of the way when wooden spikes shot out of both the trunk and the branch, missing him by less than an inch. As he landed on the ground, however, he noticed that Naruto had performed another jutsu, and was informed of just what that was when stone spikes shot out of the ground, ready to impale him. He jumped into the air again, only for his eyes to widen when Naruto blurred into view behind him, wrapping his arms around the Akatsuki member and flipping them over in the air so that they were rocketing headfirst toward the ground. Kakuzu crashed into the dirt, Naruto letting go at the last second and landing on his feet, immediately slamming his palms into the ground. Kakuzu was immediately impaled by 3 stone spikes, only for his body to explode into water. Shit, Naruto thought as he leapt out of the way of a ball of compressed wind that was fired at him from one of the creatures. He clapped his hands together. Mokuton Bunshin, he called out, and 2 replicas of himself made out of wood rose from the ground. They changed color to match Naruto perfectly, then immediately took up positions behind Naruto, so that their backs were toward each other, and they formed a triangle, all 3 of them on guard. Kakuzu and the creatures had disappeared from view. Unfortunately for them, this was Naruto's forest. The blonde closed his eyes and focused his senses. He reached behind him and tapped his clones on the backs, and the two nodded before charging off toward separate trees. Both clones held out their right hands, a ball of furiously spinning chakra building up in their palms. Rasengan. Both clones called out, smashing their chakra balls into their respective trees. In the back of his mind, Naruto knew there was some kind of gay joke in there that could have been told to Sasuke had he been there, completely shredding through them. When they were halfway into the trees, however, anyone watching intently would have been able to see a brief flicker of wind chakra enter the Rasengan balls, which caused them to explode in the clones' hands. The remaining halves of the trees were completely blown up, sending insanely large splinters flying at the creatures hiding behind them. One of the creatures seemed to have picked up on the wind chakra in time to jump away, but the other wasn't so lucky, getting completely torn up by the wooden splinters that, upon Naruto forming a half-ram seal, sprouted a massive amount of spikes that served to pierce its body even further. One of the spikes hit its mark, because the creature's mask opened in a gasp as 3 cracks went down its front, before its body started melting just like the other two. When it was nothing more than a puddle of black stuff, the mask shattered. Naruto let out a sigh of relief, especially when he watched his other clone leap after the other creature and grab it in the air from behind. The creature turned its head toward Naruto and opened his mouth, which made Naruto smirk as he knew exactly what element this was, so he started going through hand seals. Alright, let's see how we compare, he thought, clapping his hands together. Futon. Yama no Ishi. Wind element. Mountain's will. Naruto clenched his fist, whistling wind gathering around it, and then, just as the creature released its futon attack, Naruto threw a straight right punch up at the creature. The air between Naruto and the creature compressed, the force of the act shaking the surrounding area, and was then sent rocketing straight toward the creature's compressed ball of wind. The two attacks collided in midair, and just the small pieces of the wind chakra that were chipped off and flung aside were enough to cause something akin to a tornado that formed around the two attacks, slicing up any tree reckless enough to remain standing as the wind passed through. Then, Naruto's attack overpowered the creatures, and Naruto saw, and was history's first witness to such a thing. A black tendril creatures and a wooden clone get sliced up into thousands of small gooey and splintery messes that was launched around the recently made clearing, landing here and there with a splatter too. All that remained of the mask was dust. Hey, and that makes 4. Only the freak left, Naruto said with a pleased grin. He perked up and spun around, to see Kakuzu standing some distance away from him, glaring heatedly at the blonde. I wonder if you will look so pleased when I scoop out your brain and crush it in front of your eyes, brat, Kakuzu growled out, which made Naruto scoff. Well, joke's on you, dipshit, I hardly even use it. I suppose you have a reason for being able to joke even at this point, Kakuzu said as he clapped his hands together. However, I'm not through yet. Kakuzu tensed up, and his body started bulging everywhere. Something was writhing like crazy under his skin, and the stitches holding his skin together strained and snapped from the pressure put on them. Hundreds of black tendrils shot out of Kakuzu's body and spilled out of his mouth, which ripped his cowl and face mask off. His limbs were sewn together again, and all the tendrils gathered around Kakuzu's head, forming 8 long, black arm-like appendages that surrounded his head. He looked even more freakish now, and the amount of chakra Naruto sensed made Naruto frown. What the hell is the point of being really powerful if everyone else is as well? He muttered to himself, before taking a deep breath and nodding. Alright, tentacle face, let's do this. With that, Naruto charged. Chapter 15. Ninth Platoon, consisting of Yamashiro Aoba, Akamichi Choji, Yamanaka Ino, and leader Namiyashi Raida, didn't have too much trouble trying to locate the 5th platoon, given that a massive forest had shot into the sky rather suddenly, visible for miles. So, they weren't exactly hard to find. After all, for the last 5 minutes, the forest had been rocked by what could only be described as earthquakes and tidal waves. They were surprised, however, when they reached the team at the outskirts of the massive forest, only to see that they were missing a member. Kakashi-sensei, Choji said as the 9th platoon landed in front of Team 7 and a dead Akatsuki member. Where's Naruto? He's fighting this freak's partner, Sasuke said, nudging the Akatsuki member with his foot. He needed some space to Sasuke cut himself off when the ground shook something fierce, and he looked toward Naruto's location to see a large cloud of dust rising in the distance. The enemy is strong, Kakashi picked up for Sasuke. In order for Naruto to use some of his more destructive jutsu, he needed some space. What, we're not going to help him? Ino asked in surprise. Things could be going badly for him. If things go south, Naruto will come to us, Sasuke said simply. From the sound of it, he had complete confidence in Naruto's abilities. Hey, the dead Akatsuki member barked suddenly, making the members of 9th Platoon jump in surprise. Don't underestimate Kakuzu. He'll beat the crap out of that blonde brat, then he'll come here and waste you all. He's not dead? Raida asked in amazement. His neck is clearly broken. Yeah, this guy is a bit hard to kill, it seems, Kakashi said with a nod. And Kakashi was the one who was cut off this time. A massive explosion was heard in the distance, another massive cloud of dust rising from the trees. And his partner is pretty tough as well. Despite his body consisting of nothing but those strange tendrils, Kakuzu seemed to have the same weak points as any other human being, judging by his grunts of pain whenever Naruto's fists impacted with vital spots. Unfortunately, he was dense as hell. Normally, a human would have exploded upon getting punched by Naruto, but this guy was just knocked back, and he packed a massive amount of power as well. His hits were close to Naruto's own in power, and they weren't even powered by chakra. Kakuzu had pulled back his tendrils again. Realizing that long range didn't work too well against Naruto, he had put everything into his physical power, and taken human form again. But with all that packed under his skin, he became incredibly dense, and Naruto was sure that some of the tendrils had become springs inside his arms, coiled and released whenever he threw a punch. So it was no surprise that Naruto's nose was broken as he, panting, stood across from Kakuzu in one of the water-filled craters that had cleared most of the forest Naruto had created. Well, you're resilient, I'll give you that, brat, Kakuzu said, breathing heavily as well. Oh yeah, and he had a metric fuckton of stamina, just like Naruto. A victory through attrition would take way too long. Thanks, Naruto muttered, releasing a steadying breath. Seriously, though, I'd like it if you could just go down already. Kakuzu didn't respond to that. Instead, his legs tensed up, and a nanosecond later he shot toward Naruto like a rocket. The blonde barely dodged the right hook thrown at his face, then leaned back to avoid a follow-up left. He ducked under another right and shot forward, smashing his forehead into Kakuzu's chest and making him stumble back. Then he went on the offensive for the umpteenth time that day. This was impossible, though. Naruto could feel his energy start running out. He was actually starting to run out of chakra, against an opponent who still stood. Kakuzu seemed to notice Naruto's waning strength as well, judging by the grin on his now unmasked face. He actually had the courage to raise his hand and catch Naruto's fist as it came flying at him. What's the matter, kid? Running out of steam? He asked mockingly, before driving his fist up into Naruto's solar plexus, making the blonde spit up a wad of blood as he cried out in pain. You, Naruto roared in anger and jumped, spinning in the air while Kakuzu was still holding onto his fist and lashing out with a kick to the missing nin's temple, sending him flying and making him let go in the process. It showed how tired Naruto was getting by how his left leg gave out when he landed, and his knee landed on the water. Damn it, these guys don't mess around. It was Naruto's fault, really. He had used Hidan as an average, and had deemed Kakuzu to be slightly above him in power, and so he had just launched jutsu after jutsu, tiring himself out too quickly. It was all well and good to fight Kakashi and win, since he knew the man, knew his skills and tactics, knew how to combat the Sharingan. Fighting an unknown was completely different. Naruto closed his eyes and took a deep breath, but when he opened them again, he found himself standing inside the now very familiar sewer of his mind. Oh, wow, came an amused voice from behind the massive bars, and Naruto could see that Kurama was grinning slightly. It's been a long time since you were pushed like this, Naruto. At this rate, you're going to die, you know. Shut up, Naruto muttered, crossing his arms. I'm just a bit out of breath, that's all. Kurama stared at Naruto in silence for a few seconds, but then walked up to the bars and lowered his head to peer out at Naruto. Normally, I'd just be amused and sort of impressed with your resilience, brat, but in case you hadn't noticed, this man has no qualms about beating the ever-loving crap out of you. And also, you might remember that you sent your teammates away? Stupid move, by the way, but then I'm no longer surprised when you do something stupid. It seems to be a trend. Get to the point, Naruto growled out with a glare. He really wasn't in the mood to trade insults with Kurama right now. My point is, this man is stronger than you, Kurama said, ignoring how Naruto's glare intensified. Alright, maybe that's not true, but you've wasted too much chakra. You got a big head and thought you could beat this guy with brute force like you've always done, but this man is old, and he has more experience in his pinky than you do your entire body. In short, you lost this fight the second you started flinging those high-power jutsu at him. Naruto frowned, but he did see the truth in Kurama's words. He was never going to admit it, and he definitely didn't like it, but it was true nonetheless. And after this man beats you senseless, he will take you back to whatever lair the Akatsuki is hiding in, and he's going to extract me from you. While being separated from you has been my dream for a long time now, there will be no freedom for me, and you will die from the extraction. Neither of us want to experience that outcome. So, it's time for you to stop resisting, Naruto. Naruto blinked at that and looked up at Kurama in surprise. You're not seriously going to suggest. You're a Jinchuriki, you stubborn brat, Kurama barked. Use my power. You have no other choice. Yes, not wanting to rely on my power is admirable and all, but maybe you didn't hear me. If you don't, you will die. Even if I were to agree, I have no idea how to use it, Naruto muttered. He really hated it when Kurama had a point. He couldn't argue with it, and if there was anything Naruto found more annoying than Sasuke lording some great accomplishment over him, it was when Kurama won an argument. Don't worry, brat, that's the good thing about me, Kurama said, a wide grin appearing on his face. My chakra is filled with hatred and anger, and you've most likely noticed many times that when you're angry, you act on instinct. Naruto was still frowning as he stared up at Kurama. Then, he nodded. Alright, let's do this. But if I so much as think that you might be trying to take over. Don't worry, this time is a freebie, no strings attached, Kurama said as the water beneath Naruto's feet started to boil and glow orange. The water seemed to come alive and rose up in tendrils to wrap around Naruto's legs, steadily climbing upward. Naruto gritted his teeth as the chakra started covering him. It felt like his skin was on fire wherever the chakra touched him. He had long since believed his own chakra to be one of the most powerful in the world, but this was bordering on extreme. There was no way the human body could handle all of Kurama's chakra at once, and people had been trying that for decades. But he felt the power bonding to his muscles, he felt himself growing stronger, even through the intense pain he was feeling. It was so intense that for the first time in a very long time, Naruto let loose a roar of pain that echoed in the sewer, accompanied by Kurama's laugh. Now, kid, let's go wild. Back in the real world, Kakuzu was climbing out of the water, having lost his grip on his water walking after that surprisingly jarring kick to the head. He was ready to go another round with the brat, when he suddenly noticed goosebumps appearing on his arm. Which was strange in itself, because he hadn't gotten goosebumps since before he mastered the Jongu and changed his entire body. He didn't even think he could get them anymore. And yet there they were, and when he looked up he noticed why. The boy, Senju Naruto, a ninja he begrudgingly had to respect for his power and resilience, was clenching his fists and gritting his teeth, a continuous growl rumbling in his throat. An orange color was swirling in his eyes, and his pupils shrank and lengthened, turning into a pair of slits as the whisker marks on his cheeks thickened. Was he? Kakuzu's musing was answered when an orange chakra started swirling around the boy, who got to his feet and flexed his fingers, his nails lengthening and turning into claws. Well now, Kakuzu muttered to himself as he narrowed his eyes slightly. That's not good. The leader had been calling for a while now, so perhaps a tactical retreat was. Naruto growled louder, before letting loose an amazingly powerful roar that completely blew the water out of the crater they were standing in, also lifting Kakuzu off his feet and sending him soaring into a small patch of untouched forest. It didn't stay untouched for long, and Kakuzu smashed through tree after tree, before landing on the ground with a crunch. Thank the heavens his body no longer had any bones, or he was sure that many of them would have been broken. No, Kakuzu cried out when Naruto seemed to materialize out of thin air above him, and rammed his knee down into Kakuzu's non-existent spine, another thing he was no grateful that he didn't have. Before Kakuzu even had time to truly register the incredible pain in his back, he felt the boy grab his head, and suddenly he found himself airborne once more. The incredibly old shinobi quickly came to his senses, though, righting himself in midair and lashing out with his arm, which separated mid-forearm and shot off, attached by 3 black, tar-like tendrils. The hand latched onto an unharmed tree and he came to a jerking halt in the air, before the ropes were pulled back into his arm, yanking him toward the tree and landing on a branch on his feet. He was already getting tired, and now that the blonde had tapped into a reserve tank of incredibly powerful chakra, the outcome of this battle wasn't as certain as it had been a few minutes ago. Kakuzu couldn't believe that he had actually forgotten about the Kyuubi. He had to retreat for now. If only for a couple of minutes. He needed a moment to recover. Suddenly, Kakuzu discovered that he wasn't alone on the branch. He looked to his left to find himself staring into those intense orange eyes. Oh, he didn't even see the punch coming. 1 second, the blonde had just stood there glaring impudently at him, and then next second, stars had exploded in front of Kakuzu's eyes, and he once more found himself flying through the air. Maybe this was becoming a tray, herc. Kakuzu grunted out when the boy flashed into view above him and dropped a heel down on the immortal's midsection, rocketing him down into the ground with considerable force. The old shinobi let out several coughs, both because his throat was filled with dust, and because that blow in the following meeting with the ground had knocked the wind out of him, and slowly opened his eyes to stare up at the silhouette in the sky. The boy's hand was raised, and there was a ball of swirling chakra in his hand as he came falling toward Kakuzu. Then, the ball grew to a size of about 2 feet in diameter, which made Kakuzu frown. Well, crap. Kakashi had been concerned when the ground had stopped shaking, indicating that the fight between Naruto and Kakuzu was most likely over. The concern had come from the fact that he could barely sense Naruto at that point, indicating that his chakra reserves were dangerously low. That concern had quickly turned into alarm, however, when Naruto's chakra signal suddenly intensified, and the area had been bathed in an incredibly powerful and sinister chakra, one that Kakashi knew well, despite not having felt it for over 10 years. "Sensei," Sasuke spoke up, frowning. "Is this?" "Yeah," Kakashi said with a nod. "For Naruto to use this, he must be in." Kakashi didn't even have time to finish the sentence before Sasuke vanished from view, taking off with incredible speed. He was surprised to see that Hinata quickly overcame the initial fear of the chakra and followed Sasuke almost immediately. "Ninth platoon," Kakashi said, looking to Raida and gesturing for Hidan's body. "Take this guy back to Konoha. We'll be along shortly." With that, the one-eyed Junin took off as well, not giving Raida the opportunity to argue with being assigned a delivery job. "Damn brats," he muttered as he ran, noticing that he wasn't catching up to his students. "I must be getting old." Kakashi stumbled slightly when another explosion rocked the area, followed by a deafening silence. Now the fight had to be over. If it wasn't, then Kakashi would be overcome with jealousy over the stamina of the two combatants. If it had been Kakashi fighting Naruto, he probably would have been too worn out to even move by now. And besides, the feel of Kyuubi's chakra had disappeared, so that was a good sign. The Junin came to a complete stop next to his 2 students at the edge of a newly made clearing, and joined them in staring at the scene in shock. The clearing was about half the size of Konoha itself, with craters covering more than 4/5 of it. To the right, in the largest crater there, which looked big enough to have been hit by a meteor, stood a lone figure, who they quickly recognized as Naruto. There was no sign of Kakuzu, save for some black liquid spattered here and there, along with the occasional piece of torn cloth. "Wow!" Sasuke uttered in amazement as his gaze drifted over to the blonde in time to see his knees give out. The Uchiha blurred out of view and appeared by Naruto to catch him before his knees even touched the ground. A weak grin spread on the blonde's face as he slowly turned his head to look up at his friend. "Yo, Sasuke. I won." "Yeah, I noticed that," Sasuke said, grabbing Naruto's arm and slinging it over his shoulders. "You know, when you go overboard in style, don't you?" "Hilarious." Naruto muttered sarcastically. "I fucked up in this fight." "Doesn't look like it," Sasuke said as he nudged a piece of cloth with his foot. "I'd say you did a pretty good job of wiping this guy off the face of the earth." "How the hell could you have fucked up?" "I'm too tired to tell the story now, but I'll let you know later." Naruto said, exhaling slowly. I think I'm going to take a nap now. You do that, Sasuke said. I've got you. Dash dot. In a dark cave in an unknown location, a massive statue stood with its hands raised. 6 of its fingers were occupied by 6 humanoid projections, all of them wearing long, high-collared coats. One of them, who looked like he had a Venus flytrap covering his body, spoke up. Kakuzu is dead, he spoke in a pleasant, polite tone of voice. Then, his voice switched to a darker, no-nonsense tone. And Hidan has been captured. His gaze drifted down to the motionless woman laying at the base of the statue. They won't be joining us for the Nibi ceiling. The Kyuubi brat and his team again, was it? The tallest of the projections, a man easily recognizable as Hoshigaki Kisame, said with an amused chuckle. My, they're just picking us off one after the other, aren't they? You admire them, Kisame? Uchiha Itachi asked, glancing at Kisame, who gave another chuckle. The boy in particular, the swordsman said. When he was just a brat he managed to block a swing from Samahata. And now as a young adult, he's been responsible for taking out at least 2 of us. Of course I admire him. I'll still cleave his legs off when I meet him, but there's nothing wrong with a bit of respect between warriors. What is the plan now? Itachi asked as his gaze drifted toward the leader of the group, a man whose silhouette showed spiky hair much like Naruto's. His eyes had no irises, and the pupils had 3 circles around them. The man's eyes closed in thought for a moment. The boy is becoming a problem. So, do we go after him again? Kisame asked, his tone suggesting that he was grinning. No. Kisame, Itachi, continue your search for the Yonbi. I shall go to Konoha and collect the Kyuubi. 3 days later, one could find a visibly annoyed Senju Naruto sitting in a bed in Konoha's hospital. With him in the room were Sasuke and Hinata. While Hinata was standing by the window, watching the birds fluttering by, Naruto and Sasuke were amusing themselves with some janken. They were into their 57th round. Yay! Naruto muttered in a dulled tone as he held up a rock to Sasuke's scissors. Oh no, Sasuke said, sounding equally bored in his monotone voice. Please cheer up, you two, Hinata said softly. It's a beautiful day, after all. And this isn't the first time we've had to wait. Usually, I don't mind waiting for Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said. Sometimes it's even kinda nice to have a bit of peace before a dull mission, but seriously, waiting for him in a hospital? That's kinda bordering on unbearable. For once, I'm in full agreement, Sasuke said with a frown. And it's worse for me, because I'm not even a patient. Hey, I'm not a patient, either. Naruto argued. I was fully healed by yesterday morning. It's just these demon doctors who insist on keeping me here for observation. Multiple fractures in both arms and both legs, 4 ribs broken, 3 cracked, a ruptured spleen, a broken nose, and a concussion, yet fully healed in 2 days. Sasuke muttered, his bored look vanishing in order to give Naruto an annoyed frown. My jealousy has never been this strong. He says that, but he isn't fully healed yet, Hinata said softly, giving Sasuke a placating smile. His bones are still a bit fragile, and there may be some lingering nerve damage. The tingle in my toes has nothing to do with nerve damage, Naruto argued. I'm just sick and tired of this freaking hospital bed. Hard and lumpy though it may be, I prefer my own bed over this any day. Sasuke opened his mouth to speak, but the door slid open at that moment, revealing their lazy Junin commander, who looked chipper as always. Hey, guys, I got lost, he said happily and without shame, as usual. He was treated to a pair of glares and a disapproving look. You could at least be a bit creative with your excuse, Sasuke scolded. We're not gonna buy it, but it provides some amusement, at least. Kakashi just gave a shrug, showing how little he cared about his student's opinion. Well, Naruto, you'll be pleased to know that the hospital will be discharging you today, the Junin said as he walked up to Naruto's bed and reached into his kunai pouch, taking out a folded piece of paper. And I got you something that I thought you might like. Kakashi held out the paper to Naruto, who took it with a curious look on his face. What's this? Naruto asked, unfolding the paper and reading it. A permission slip? The Godem has granted you permission to read the Forbidden Scroll, Kakashi said, which made his students go wide-eyed. The Forbidden Scroll? Hinata asked in amazement. But, it's forbidden for a reason. Well, it's more like a supervised peek, but even that is an honor, Kakashi said. Many of the jutsu in that scroll are forbidden because they are dangerous, but some are forbidden only because of the dangers that come with using them, such as the incredible chakra consumption of the Kage Bunshin. Tsunade-sama will be with you when you read it, and will decide which jutsu you are allowed to learn. Is that alright? Sasuke asked as he jutted his thumb over his shoulder in Naruto's direction. Entrusting the jutsu in that scroll to this guy? Naruto showed that moment to show just how much he had healed by shooting up in his bed and slamming his forehead into Sasuke's in a vicious headbutt, which knocked the Uchiha to the floor. Hey, you dick. Most of those jutsu were created by the Shodai and Naidame. It's practically my birthright. Kakashi chuckled at the familiar antics of his students, and Hinata giggled as Sasuke shot to his feet and slammed his forehead into Naruto's to engage in a furious glaring match. You dare. Sasuke growled out in that energetic voice that only seemed to come out when he argued with Naruto. Well, Kakashi said, coughing to grab their attention, Tsunade-sama claims that you'll get to read the scroll, but I'm getting the feeling that there is only one jutsu that she wishes for you to learn. This caused Naruto and Sasuke to break their glaring to focus on Kakashi. What jutsu? Naruto asked. There is a jutsu in the Forbidden Scroll that was created by the Naidame Hokage, and later adopted by the Yondaime, Kakashi explained, a smile visible behind his mask as he gave Naruto a look that seemed somewhat excited. No doubt, that very jutsu was the reason why Jiraiya-sama focused so much on teaching you Fuinjutsu. Sasuke's eyes widened at that. You mean? That's right, Kakashi said, nodding. The Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God technique. A tense silence followed this statement. It was understandable. After all, Kakashi had told them all how difficult the Yondaime had claimed that learning that jutsu was. And while Naruto was amazing at learning jutsu, he was far from the genius that the Yondaime was. Then again, Kakashi thought, glancing at Naruto and seeing the shock melt away to make room for excitement, I suppose there are many kinds of genius. This kid will probably surprise me yet again. The Hiraishin, Naruto muttered, looking down to stare at his lap. The jutsu that earned my father the name, Yellow Flash. He looked up suddenly, a grin on his face. Sounds like fun. Which means that if he learns this, Hinata mumbled from her place by the window, Naruto-kun will be even faster than Sasuke-kun. Sasuke twitched and whipped his head toward Hinata. We agreed after the Haku fight that space-time jutsu don't count. Right, anyway, Kakashi said, clapping his hands together to get attention once more, before Naruto and Sasuke slipped into another long-winded argument. Naruto still needs a bit of rest, and I have to talk to him in private. Sasuke, Hinata, you have today and tomorrow off still. Since the doctors have cleared you, you might want to get a bit of training in before Team 7 goes back to active duty. What do you need to talk to him about? Sasuke asked, which got him a frown from Kakashi. If I wanted to tell you, I wouldn't ask to talk to him in private, would I? Sasuke grumbled at that. Fine, didn't really care, anyway. He muttered, nodding to Hinata and gesturing for the door. We'll leave you two alone, then. I can't come? Naruto asked in a somewhat pleading tone of voice. I'd really like to get out of here. Sorry, you're going to have to wait for a little while longer, Kakashi said with a smile as his two other students left the room, closing the door behind them. Kakashi moved over to the door and leaned against it, sharpening his senses. You'll excuse me if I don't start talking right away. Yeah, they're still outside, Naruto said with a nod. Immediately, something, most likely Sasuke's fist, slammed into the door, followed by the sound of footsteps hurrying away, which made both Naruto and Kakashi smile. The smile disappeared from Kakashi's face, however, to be replaced by a serious look as the man put his hands in his pockets. He was quiet for a moment, not because he thought Sasuke and Hinata were still outside, but rather so that he could give Naruto a once-over. How are your muscles holding up? He asked seriously, getting a shocked look from Naruto. The burning is still there, right? How did? In her time as a Jinchuriki, Kushina used the Kyuubi's chakra twice, and she reported that it was so potent that it felt as though her body was on fire. The report stated that the pain lingered for weeks. Jiraiya-sama says that your seal was designed to let its chakra mingle with your own, so the effects might be lessened, but this was the first time you've used it, right? Naruto frowned. Yeah, it's potent, alright, he said, raising his hand and clenching his fist. I was at my limits, but the chakra easily doubled my power. But you're right, it was damaging. It's not even something I can rely on as a last resort. Because, Naruto muttered, if I use that chakra, I burn out immediately. When I stopped using it back then, I could barely move, and it wasn't because I was exhausted. It felt like my blood had been replaced with acid. What if I encounter an unexpected enemy after using it? Kakashi nodded at that. But then, the effects could be temporary, he reasoned. Perhaps your body will adjust if you use it enough times? That made Naruto frown again. There was a hint of anger in his eyes as he looked up at Kakashi. His fists were clenched, and Kakashi understood why. While Naruto had never displayed any real animosity toward the Kyuubi, he hated the thought of relying on its power, of acting like a Jinchuriki. Are you telling me to use it in battle from now on? Not at all, I know you're opposed to it, Kakashi said, raising his hands in a placating manner. I'm just suggesting that you use it in a controlled environment, such as during training, both to master it, and to let your body adapt. A snort was the reply he got. You don't think it's a good idea? Kakashi asked in surprise. Naruto had never really backed down from training, even when he didn't like it. Oh, I think it's a better idea than only using it as a last resort, Naruto said, turning his head to look toward the window. I was just wondering if the populace of Konoha would be okay if the village was suddenly bathed in Kurama's chakra again after so many years. Kakashi had to nod in realization at that. The villagers wouldn't be too pleased, that was for sure. It might even cause a panic. I'm sure we can find a suitable place for you to train, Kakashi mumbled, raising his hand and rubbing his chin. I'll talk to Tsunade-sama about it. She might know a good spot. I don't like it. But, well, I guess it's for the best, Naruto said, crossing his arms. Besides, I think Kurama might feel a bit better if he's allowed to stretch his proverbial legs a bit. Kakashi's eye widened in surprise, as though he hadn't even taken the fact that Kurama was a sentient creature into consideration. I guess that's true. Naruto stretched slowly as he wandered through the streets of Konoha. Walking next to him was Ino, who had found him just a few minutes after he was discharged from the hospital. After a bit of small talk, Naruto had agreed to take her out on another day. That hospital, they must have hidden something in the mattress, Naruto muttered, getting a few kinks out of his neck. I'm always so stiff when I get out of there. Well, the hospital is better than the alternative, Ino reasoned, giving Naruto a worried look. By the way, are you sure you should be out and about? You looked really bad after that last mission. I heal fast, don't worry about it, Naruto said with a shrug. Anyway, what do you want to do? Ino glanced around for a moment, and then shrugged, giving Naruto a small smile. My schedule's clear all day. Why don't we just walk around a bit and see if we find something interesting? Yeah, that works. I need to move my legs a bit, anyway, Naruto said, nodding in agreement. After a few moments of silence, however, he glanced at his date. Hey, Ino, why did you want to date me? Huh? Ino uttered, blinking up at her fellow blonde. What do you mean? I mean, are you dating me only because Sasuke is off the market? You did have a massive crush on him. Ino laughed at that and waved him off. You've been gone for a long time, Naruto. We all had to grow up sometime. I was crushing on Sasuke because he was the Uchiha prodigy, and he was very good looking to boot, whereas you were loud and sort of obnoxious. Naruto coughed at that. He couldn't really deny how he had acted back at the academy, but he couldn't help but mutter, look at the pot calling the kettle black. Okay, so I was kind of loud as well, Ino conceded. But like I said, we had to grow up sometime, and I have, and so have you. You're a pretty reliable guy, and with the baby fat gone, you've gone from cute to hot. Not to mention that you're a very strong ninja. How can I not want to date you? Naruto uttered, giving Ino a somewhat unconvinced look, which made her laugh. Okay, so if Sasuke was straight, I'd probably still be crushing on him, but he's not, and I'm happy about that. Him batting for the other team just let me sit down and think about what I was really looking for in a guy. And to be honest, having spent all these years with Shikamaru and Choji, I can't live without a bit of noise, and Sasuke isn't exactly famous for being loud and spontaneous. So what you're saying is, you've grown. Yes, Ino said with a nod. Sasuke may be an academy girl's dream guy, but that's all. Guys like him usually aren't good boyfriend material for girls like me. She laughed. And speaking of growing, I've even stopped going on those insane diets. Oh really? Naruto asked in amazement. He gave Ino a once-over, noting that she still had an incredible figure. Doesn't look like it. Well, I had a run-in with Guy-sensei one day, Ino explained. He started chastising me, telling me how a ninja can't function at 100% without proper nourishment, and that if I wanted to work off my meals, I could just train hard. Back in the day, training wasn't exactly top priority, but I've taken to it pretty well. It just goes to show that he was right. I'm eating properly, and I can even gorge myself on sweets every once in a while, and just look at me. Ino took a step away from Naruto and did a little twirl, before striking a somewhat provocative pose, which Naruto had to admit sent a bit of a tingle down his spine. I've maintained my figure despite that, all thanks to training. She gave a small laugh and stepped over to Naruto again, looping her arm around his. And on that subject, there's a place over there that sells these really delicious daifuku, she said, pointing down the street. Treat me? And that concludes part 3 of this story. Thank you for spending your time here at Ichiraku Ramen and listening all the way to the end. Your support helps keep these stories alive and allows the shinobi world to continue through new adventures and alternate timelines. If you enjoyed Konoha's Dream Team, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. Once again, full credit goes to ZenoNoKyuubi, the original writer of this story. If you would like to read the original version, you can find the link to the story in the description below. Let me know in the comments what story you would like to hear next. Until the next time, stay safe, and I'll see you again at Ichiraku Ramen.